Our story begins with a frantic phone call. Hello, 110? I need to report a Resident Evil dungeon growing on my wall. Help! Through a circular portal of light, we see a glimpse of a world beyond, a dilapidated, rotting restaurant. Dried residues of unknown liquids stain the floor, while outside the window, black rain washes over the ruins. A few zombies stagger through the downpour, and in the distance, the silhouette of a massive humanoid looms. He desperately willed the portal to close, and as if responding to his thoughts, the blue vortex on the wall suddenly shrank. It vanished completely. He felt like a genius. This was the kind of terrifying fortune one simply couldn't handle alone. Naturally, handing this over to the state was the only logical choice. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Are you the one who called? The officer asked. Yes. Did you bring guns? Buddy, how much have you had to drink? Why don't you ask if we brought handcuffs too? Young man, you reported a Resident Evil portal in your house. I know it sounds crazy, he replied, but whatever you see next, please don't move, touch anything, or get close. When the two officers finally saw the ruined world behind the portal, they both let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. Is this a holographic projection? Is 3D tech this good now? It's not an effect, he told them. Just watch. He hurried into the kitchen and returned 10 seconds later, holding a live hen. Look closely, he said. He tossed the bird directly into the shimmering light. The startled hen had barely reached the restaurant's entrance when it let out a blood-curdling screech. Its feathers turned black and withered as it began to mutate right before their eyes. A deathly silence filled the living room. Finally, an officer grabbed his radio. Calling command center. This is Officer 9527. We are at Haiban City, Xingfu Gardens, Building 4, Unit 3020. We have a massive, unknown event, not a criminal case. It's not a fire. There is a door here, a door to hell. Requesting SWAT and chemical defense units immediately. Lock down the entire neighborhood. This is a level 1 biohazard threat. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. And so, the peaceful Xingfu Gardens was suddenly filled with the roar of fighter jets and helicopters. On the ground, police cars and armored vehicles formed layer after layer of security. Inside the temporary command center, we find Lin Han. He is 24 years old, a local freelance designer with no criminal record and parents who passed away years ago. With no history of mental illness, he sat before the authorities. Half an hour ago, he claimed a door to a parallel world had opened on his wall. The officials confirmed his story. Their technicians had already sent in drones to conduct a preliminary exploration of the area. The air samples revealed a high concentration of unknown viral aerosols, yet the oxygen levels and gravity were familiar. Even the atmospheric pressure was identical to Earth's. It was indeed another Earth. What about my house? Lin Han asked. His home was now a top-secret national site. Every resident in the building had already signed non-disclosure agreements. They had been relocated, and from this moment on, that space no longer belonged to him, or at least, not to the civilian Lin Han. And what about me? Am I going to be sliced up for research? At this, a rare smile flickered across Chen Guofeng's stern face. No, you are far more valuable than that. Just then, General Zhao, a man usually seen only on the military news, walked in. Young man, you must have been terrified tonight. I've been briefed on the situation. Tell me, can you control that door? The general asked if he could open, close, or move it. Lin Han explained he could operate it with his mind, but moving it was impossible. He could sense the door's size was linked to him somehow, though he didn't fully understand it yet. Being able to close it was enough. Young man, representing the state, I must ask you a question. You surely understand the weight of what this door represents. It was a crisis. If the viruses from the other side leaked through, it would mean an absolute catastrophe for their world. And yet, it was also an unprecedented opportunity, a parallel world filled with unknown technology and untapped resources. Lin Han held the key to it all. What do you intend to do? The general asked. The young man fell silent. He had decided on an answer before calling the police, but facing this level of national scrutiny made it hard to breathe. Sir, I'm just an ordinary citizen. I don't know much about grand theories, but I know I can't handle what's over there alone. So, I am handing this door over to the country. But I do have one condition. Name it, the general replied. Lin Han requested absolute state protection, not just from the monsters on the other side, but from anyone who might try to exploit him. I only trust the state, he said. General Zhao replied that the country had received his trust and would not fail him. Immediately, a strategic special operations group was formed, codenamed Spark, and Lin Han was officially recruited into its ranks. He was granted the rank of civilian major, serving as a special advisor for Project Spark with full regimental-level benefits. His immediate family was also placed on a top-tier security list. We see him now, standing outside the isolation room's glass wall. He watched 6 fully armed soldiers preparing for the mission before the light gate. All units, pay attention, this is not a drill. Chen Guofeng's voice crackled through the communication channel, reminding everyone that this was an exploration across time and space. Our primary goal was to confirm environmental safety and collect samples. Safety, as always, remained the absolute priority. If they encountered uncontrollable danger, they were to retreat immediately. Lin Han took a deep breath and raised his right hand. Though he could control the door with his mind alone, he still made the gesture out of habit. Countdown, Chen Guofeng ordered. 3, 2, open the door. With a thought, Lin Han moved the barrier, and the deep blue vortex rapidly expanded across the wall. A flow of air carrying the scent of death rushed through, but it was instantly neutralized by the room's negative pressure system. The environmental monitoring team reported that while radiation levels on the other side were slightly high, they were within safe limits. The oxygen concentration matched Earth's perfectly. Viral aerosols were detected, but their activity was remarkably low, non-existent, really. With no risk of airborne infection confirmed, Lieutenant Colonel Lei Long, the team leader, was the first to step into the vortex. It was like passing through a thin membrane. A second later, he was standing in a dilapidated room in the other world. Visuals confirmed an indoor environment. The building structure was heavily damaged, but there was no immediate risk of collapse. On the command center's large screen, we see Lei Long's first-person view. Thick dust everywhere and mold creeping up the corners. There was also a patch of dried, blackened blood. The remaining 5 team members followed in file, deploying with practiced precision. "Captain, look at this," one member called out from the ruins in the corner, wiping away a thick layer of dust. It was a flattened metal street sign for Haitian City No. 3 Middle School, with a tattered backpack lying just beneath it. A few exam prep books tumbled out, leaving the command center in a dead silence until Chun Guofeng's voice broke through, sounding quite raspy. Simplified Chinese characters, Haitian exam materials, and an identical physical environment with the same atmospheric composition. "I think we no longer need to doubt it," he said. "This isn't some alien planet or a demon realm. We realize now that this is a parallel Earth." Lin Han watched the screen, feeling a complex swirl of emotions despite his earlier suspicions. Seeing these familiar traces of civilization with his own eyes was breathtaking. But then, something shifted. There was a situation. Lei Long's voice suddenly grew urgent as he reported movement outside. The screen switched back to his primary perspective. He aimed his weapon out the window. In the distance, a dark shadow was moving across the long shadows of the ruins. It moved like a humanoid hunting cat, stopping abruptly to look up toward the 3rd floor. It was a face one could only look at from afar. Its mouth was torn open all the way to its ears, and its blood-red eyes pierced through the gloom. "All units, prepare for combat." Lei Long's voice was terrifyingly calm as he locked onto the target and authorized his team to open fire upon detection. The tactical analyst spoke at a rapid-fire pace, noting that the target moved on all fours with incredible speed. Its skin was a sickly, ashen white. Based on the skeletal structure analysis, it appeared the creature was originally human, having undergone a severe and violent mutation. "And look at those claws," the analyst noted as the image zoomed in. They were 10 centimeters long, shimmering with a metallic luster. The monster below lost its patience, its hind leg muscles tensing violently. Lin Han gasped, realizing it was about to leap. They were on the 3rd floor, after all. The shadow shot up like an arrow from a bow, grabbing the 2nd floor ledge as it ascended. It lunged straight for the 3rd floor window. The speed was staggering, and the analyst scrambled to record the threat level data. Facing the incoming horror, Lei Long didn't even blink. The moment the monster leaped, he pulled the trigger. 3 short bursts rang out. The very first bullet found its mark, completely shattering the monster's right shoulder joint. The second bullet didn't miss its mark either. The creature was flipped midair and slammed heavily onto the street below. "Target neutralized," Lei Long reported calmly. He confirmed the kill, noting the head was a weakness and the body was down. As he requested further instructions, Zhao Jiangwo slapped the table. It seemed these things weren't as invincible as they appeared. As long as the laws of physics still applied, our firearms remained effective, a realization that allowed Lin Han to breathe a sigh of relief. The greatest fear was an invulnerable monster, but if bullets could kill it, things were manageable. However, the team remained on high alert. Chun Guofeng's voice carried a hint of excitement as he ordered them to collect samples immediately, eager for fresh, first-hand data. He wanted to know the muscle density, bone strength, and the composition of those black claws. Soon, Unit 2 was on the move. "Follow me downstairs for sampling. The rest stay on the 3rd floor and maintain guard." With a quick, "Yes, sir," 2 men descended. They dragged the monster's corpse into the 1st floor lobby to begin their work, reporting back to the command center as they did so. Initial tests showed the target contained a high concentration of viral activity, but that, as it turned out, was only the beginning. Its bone density was 15 times that of a normal human, with muscle fibers twice as strong. And then there were the claws. The primary component was a mix of keratin and metallic elements, with a hardness approaching steel. Metallic elements, of all things. Chun Guofeng paused, wondering how it had absorbed metal. Perhaps it had consumed some kind of mutated, metal-bearing organism. Or perhaps the virus itself could attract metallic elements from the environment. To him, this was becoming quite interesting. Chun Guofeng adjusted his glasses. If they could crack the mechanism behind this biological metallization, the possibilities were endless. Our body armor and tank plating could face a total revolution. One has to admire how quickly he pivoted to scientific research. Lin Han listened, stunned by the sheer scale of the national team's mindset. But then, a soldier reported a new situation. An anomaly was detected at the 12 o'clock position. Lei Long moved swiftly to the window as the warning crackled over the radio. He saw zombies at the end of the street, drawn by the earlier screams, beginning to gather. They were heading right for them. Lei Long reported that the count exceeded 50. They were closing in fast, and he waited for the order to engage. Zhao Jiangwo waved his hand dismissively, declaring the initial testing phase over. Now, they needed a solid bridgehead. He ordered the Chemical Defense Engineering Unit to enter immediately and secure the room where the Twin Rivers Gate stood. They were to establish Outpost Zero. He told the soldiers not to spare a single bullet. In this world, mercy was a luxury. As long as the targets were within range, every squad had permission to fire at will. Lei Long's voice crackled, echoing the commander's orders. Don't hold back on the ammo, he said. Send them on their way. And so, the rhythmic mechanical chatter of gunfire began. Rifles extending from the third-floor windows wove a lethal web of fire. In less than a minute, over 50 zombies were neutralized. With the targets cleared, Zhao Jiangwo issued his second command. To be honest, he wasn't one for wasting time. Engineering Unit 1, move in and establish Outpost Zero immediately. A group of soldiers in specialized gear rushed through the gate. Their movements were a blur of efficiency as they deployed airtight partitions and began the gap-filling process. Air circulation systems were docked and power lines laid. Lin Han felt completely outclassed by these masters of engineering. In under 5 minutes, the dilapidated walls were entirely covered by silver-white alloy panels. It was a total transformation. Soldiers used spray guns to apply a high-polymer hydrogel to the seams. This gel, upon contact with the air, would solidify within 10 seconds to form a molecular-level seal. Chen Guofeng stood nearby, explaining the science of it all. He noted that not even viral aerosols, let alone nerve gas, could penetrate this. Next, the air purification machines were brought in. Air hoses were quickly installed using magnetic quick-connect interfaces. These, we learned, served as emergency disconnect devices. Chen Guofeng explained that if an uncontrollable crisis occurred, or if the Twin Rivers Gate needed to be shut down in a hurry, this interface could be detached with a single click, sealing the pipe automatically in 0.1 seconds. No hesitation, no mess. A chill ran down Lin Han's spine at how thoroughly they had planned for disaster. Then, the report came in, airtightness tests had passed. Internal pressure was set to positive mode, and the power grid was successfully integrated. The voltage, naturally, was perfectly stable. The military broadband base station was set up with a full signal. In less than 20 minutes, the room looked like something from science fiction. And just like that, a modern outpost was complete. Lin Han watched, mouth agape, as the infrastructure was finalized in record time. Zhao Jiangwo turned toward him. Comrade Lin Han, get ready. We need you to head over there. I'm going too. You are the master of the gate, the commander said with a firm gaze. We need to test if it remains stable while you are inside. He added that there might be things only Lin Han could sense. To be honest, it was a logical, if slightly daunting, request. That earlier one-sided slaughter had given Lin Han a great sense of security. All right, I'll go, he agreed. 10 minutes later, he put on a specialized protective suit and stood before the glowing gate. His bedroom had been fully transformed into a temporary command center. Zhao Jiangwo accompanied him personally, flanked by 4 guards. Lin Han nodded and finally took the step across the threshold of the gate. The sensation beneath his feet shifted from wooden flooring to anti-slip steel plates. The air was thick with the faint, sharp scent of ozone. Welcome to Outpost Zero, Commander. Lei Long offered a crisp military salute before giving Lin Han a knowing nod. We see Lin Han look around. Through the bulletproof glass of the observation window, he saw this apocalyptic world with his own eyes for the first time. The sky was leaden gray. The streets were a chaotic mess, littered with the corpses of zombies soaking in pools of dark, stagnant blood. What is the gate's status? Chen Guofeng's voice crackled through the communicator. It's perfectly stable, a technician replied immediately. Initial tests indicated that regardless of which side Comrade Lin Han was on, the Twin Rivers Gate maintained a steady, open state. Very good. Zhao Jiangwo walked to the window and pointed toward a jewelry store on a distant street corner. An alluring golden reflection shone from the counters. That's a gold shop. Lin Han's eyes widened. It seemed their luck was holding up. Zhao Jiangwo smiled. They had found hard currency the moment they arrived. In a world like this, gold was often treated as mere scrap metal. He gave Lin Han a reassuring pat on the shoulder, a silent gesture of confidence in the mission ahead. Comrade Lin Han, are you ready to get to work? By the following morning, Outpost Zero was a hive of intense activity. Squad 1 was on point, Squad 2 cleared the entrance, and Squad 3 prepared sacks and entrenching shovels for the haul. Lei Long was busy deploying the men. Their target was the corner gold shop, 150 meters away. The threat level was still being assessed. Lin Han stood by the observation window, cradling a cup of hot soy milk. Zhao Jiangwo had issued a strict ban. Until the perimeter was cleared, he wasn't allowed to take a single step outside the outpost. Naturally, he fully supported this. Soon, a squad filed out like a silent stream. The rhythmic pops of suppressed rifles became the only sounds of the morning. Through Lei Long's body camera, we see the world outside. It felt as if he were right there with them. 5 minutes later, they reached the gold shop. After a quick security check, Lei Long led the way in. No zombies were found. As tactical spotlights flickered on, the interior was suddenly bathed in a brilliant golden glow. It was quite a sight. Watching the screen, Lin Han couldn't help but let out a soft exclamation. Gold statues, bracelets, and rings were everywhere. They lay scattered across counters and the floor like common trash. Lei Long picked up a gold bar and wiped it clean on his uniform. Zero, how is the quality of this? He asked. Back on Earth, the current price for gold was over 600 per gram. That single bar is worth 60,000, Lin Han muttered to himself. Here, it wasn't even as precious as a pack of instant noodles. Shen Guofeng's voice came through the comms, noting that gold's value relies entirely on a social consensus of it being a universal currency. When social order collapses, that consensus vanishes. In this world, the only hard currencies are the resources required for survival. Water, food, medicine, and weapons are what matter here. But back in our world, Shen Guofeng paused for a moment. It remains the very lifeblood of industry. The scene that followed was enough to make anyone's jaw drop. One soldier smashed the counter glass with his rifle butt, and then another swung an entrenching shovel like he was scooping sand, shoveling gold and silver jewelry along with the velvet display pads. It all went into military-grade sacks. There's a safe here, Lei Long said calmly. Blow it open. His team moved to obey immediately. With a muffled thud, the heavy anti-theft door was blasted open, revealing dozens of 1-kilogram gold bricks inside. They were surrounded by piles of banknotes that were now little more than scrap paper. Lei Long picked up a 1,000-credit bill. It featured an illustration of a space elevator and a map of East Asia without borders, issued by the Central Bank of the East Asian Union. Space elevators and regional unification. The realization hit Lin Han like a tidal wave. This had been a world of incredibly advanced technology. It was a world that might have even stepped into the interstellar era, yet it still fell. The soldiers began stacking gold bars like common bricks. They tossed them into crates, while Lei Long ordered his men to collect all the discarded banknotes and electronic devices containing chips. Half an hour later, a soldier reported that the initial tally was complete. The total weight of the gold was approximately 52 kilograms. In addition, they had recovered 15 kilograms of platinum and 52 kilograms of diamonds and jade. It was worth over 30 million. And this was just one small jewelry shop. To be honest, it was enough to take one's breath away. This wasn't a wasteland. It was a treasure chest. The squad prepared to move out. The soldiers hoisted the bags and crates of gold onto their shoulders as easily as if they were carrying sacks of potatoes. 20 minutes later, Lin Han finally touched the heavy metal for himself. It felt surreal, as if he were dreaming with his eyes wide open. Zhao Jingwo looked at the spoils with a satisfied smile. With this initial capital, their upcoming procurement plans could finally move forward. He looked at the young man and noted that Lin Han deserved plenty of credit for this, adding another achievement to his record. Lin Han set the gold bar down, insisting it was nothing. He was far more interested in the footage Lei Long had sent back earlier. He pointed toward the distant CBD area outside the window. If they could locate the bank vaults there, or perhaps the servers of the tech companies. His gaze grew sharp. That, he realized, was where the true treasure was hidden. And who could blame him for thinking big? Zhao Jingwo nodded in appreciation, though he reminded him that one must eat a meal one bite at a time. He then turned to Lei Long. He asked for the drone reconnaissance report. A technician switched the screen to show that a hummingbird drone had just found something. About 2 kilometers away, in an unfinished building complex, they detected a peculiar heat source. A red dot blinked rhythmically on the screen. Lin Han leaned in closer. It wasn't just a heat source. The technician zoomed in, explaining that spectral analysis showed something else. It appeared to be a reflected sunlight signal. It was highly regular, almost like Morse code. Yes, Morse code in the middle of a dead city. Zhao Jingwo's eyes lit up as he asked for a translation. The technician confirmed it was a distress signal, an SOS. The pattern repeated, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The command center fell silent. There were survivors out there. Shen Guofeng adjusted his glasses, his voice certain of the discovery. Zhao Jingwo went silent for a moment before decisively ordering a contact mission. We need a local guide, Shen Guofeng said while standing before the tactical map, explaining that a contact plan had already been formulated. The target was located in an unfinished building complex 21 kilometers from the outpost. According to the heat signature analysis, there was only one survivor. Just one. Lin Han was surprised. How could a single person survive alone in such a godforsaken place? That is exactly what we need to find out, Zhao Jingwo said in a deep voice. Anyone capable of surviving independently in Mo City was clearly no ordinary character. They needed that survival experience, and more importantly, that person's knowledge of this broken world. The mission was given the code name, Asking the Way, and the execution was assigned to the 1st Reconnaissance Squad of the Special Warfare Brigade. Equipped with a swarm of hummingbird drones, Lei Long stood at attention, guaranteeing the mission's success. For this particular operation, Lin Han could only remain an observer. He couldn't help but ask what they would do if the survivor turned out to be hostile. Zhao Jingwo spoke calmly, noting they were coming with goodwill, but if that goodwill was rejected, they had more than enough firepower to help the other party calm down. That afternoon, 2 hummingbird drones took to the sky first. Lei Long followed with 4 scouts, using the shadows of the buildings to advance quickly and silently while maintaining strict cover. Lei Long's voice crackled over the comms, reporting traces of a Ravager 300 meters ahead. On the screen, we see a monster perched atop a bus. 10 minutes later, they reached the unfinished buildings. The target was on the top floor of Building 3. Lei Long sent back the report. In the drone footage, a thin, frail woman was holding a broken makeup mirror, adjusting its angle against the sun. She wore filthy work clothes, and by her feet sat a crude water filter next to a cracked bowl. Inside was only a shallow layer of murky liquid. She had clearly reached the end of her rope, yet there she was, using a mirror to signal. Such a traditional way to call for help suggested that all communication equipment had long since failed. It showed she hadn't given up hope. Chen Guofeng analyzed the situation coolly. A will to live was good. Where there was desire, there was a foundation for a deal. Lin Han stared at that bowl of muddy water and muttered to himself. This humble, desperate struggle for survival stung him deeply. The spotter asked if they should initiate contact. Zhao Zhengwo nodded, ordering them to proceed according to Plan A. The plan was simple: drop the supplies and establish a baseline of trust. The drone began its slow, steady descent. On the rooftop, the woman immediately grew alert, grabbing a sharpened piece of rebar and crouching behind a concrete pillar. She stared fixedly at the drone. "Do not be afraid," a gentle, synthesized voice broadcasted from the drone's speakers. We see her remain silent as the voice insists they mean no harm, yet she only grips her makeshift weapon tighter. With a soft click, the drone dropped a transparent sealed bag, which landed precisely in front of her. Inside was a ration bar, a box of amoxicillin, and a single bottle of fresh water. In that gray, dying world, it was a staggering sight. To her, that bottle of water was more precious than a diamond. We can clearly see her swallow hard in anticipation. It was a primal, instinctive hunger that overrode all reason. "This is merely a greeting," the drone's voice spoke once more. The voice explained that if she was willing to talk, they needed information in exchange for more supplies. They could provide plenty of food and water. The woman stared at the bottle, her eyes filled with a desperate struggle. Finally, she tore open the packaging and took a tiny sip, closing her eyes to savor every single drop. 2 streaks of tears carved paths through the dirt on her cheeks. Contact successful, Lei Long's voice crackled over the comms. The fish had taken the bait. Watching this, Lin Han felt a wave of complex emotions. Could a single bottle of water really break someone? Well, for a drowning person, a single straw is the entire world. Zhao Zhengwo watched the screen, knowing they held the whole arc. As the sweet liquid hit her stomach, the woman, whose name was Su Wan, regained her composure. As a former virologist, logic was her second nature. She shielded the remaining water and looked up, her gaze shifting back to one of cold evaluation. They had drones, purified water, and medicine. To her, there was only one logical conclusion to be drawn. She was dealing with a powerful force that possessed a complete industrial production line. "What do you want?" she asked. Su Wan's voice was raspy but clear. She had no supplies, only her life and the knowledge inside her head. The drone's voice remained calm. They wanted intelligence regarding the city, the zombies, and the distribution of surviving factions. The more detail, the better. Su Wan took a deep breath and produced a folded map from her belongings. It was covered in various colored notes and markings, representing all the information she had gathered over the last 3 months. She unfolded the map for the camera, pointing out that the red zones were heavily infected areas where brutes roamed. There were even spitters lurking there. The blue zones marked safe houses and supply points, though most had been picked clean. Black X marks indicated the territory of the Black Steel Group, who controlled the northern industrial park with heavy weaponry. They were extremely xenophobic, capturing survivors for slave labor or even experiments. This woman was clearly a natural at gathering intelligence. Chen Guofeng immediately ordered his technicians to capture screenshots and model this data into their tactical map, asking what else she knew. Through the microphone, the question was asked if there was any other unusual news, perhaps something strange or out of the ordinary. Su Wan paused to think, a flicker of both disgust and genuine fear crossing her eyes for a brief moment. Lately, the Black Steel Group had been frantically collecting zombie heads. It seemed like a bizarre obsession. To be more precise, they wanted what was inside the heads. Su Wan explained they were looking for crystals. That single word hit like a bolt of lightning. Lin Han instinctively looked over at Zhao Zhengwo and Chen Guofeng. Chen Guofeng lunged toward the microphone, his voice rapid as he asked what color the crystals were and how large they grew. He needed to know if they emitted light. Su Wan confirmed that they did indeed glow with a faint radiance. Chen Guofeng took a sharp breath, his voice trembling with excitement as he suggested to the chief that this was a new high-energy substance. Zhao Zhengwo, his voice deep and steady, told them to ask if she knew the specific purpose of those objects. Su Wan admitted she knew a little. She had heard the Black Steel people call it God's blood, believing it granted immense power. However, the side effects were lethal, leading to immediate death or horrific mutation. The idea of gaining power made Lin Han's heart race. If the portal required an upgrade, it would certainly need a special energy source. Perhaps this was exactly what they were looking for. Zhao Zhengwo spoke up suddenly, noting that it was now necessary to establish a much deeper connection with this survivor. As he watched the woman on the screen, a flicker of appreciation crossed his eyes. "Bring her back," Zhao Zhengwo ordered. "We need her." The drone's voice crackled once more, informing her that her intelligence was valuable and that, in return, they could offer her sanctuary. They told her that if she was willing, they could take her to a safe place, a place with clean water and hot food. A place with no zombies and no Black Steel Group. Suwon froze, wondering if such a place could truly exist in this living hell. Looking down at the water in her hands, she found she could no longer refuse, and so, Suwon simply bit her lip. With a trembling voice, she agreed. Very well, the drone replied as it began to rise. Stay where you are and do not move. The voice informed her that their extraction team was already downstairs, but then it suddenly asked one more question. It wanted to know what her profession was. Suwon hesitated for a moment before straightening her back, radiating a sudden, unique confidence. She revealed her name was Su Won, director of the 3rd laboratory at the Haitian Biotechnology Research Institute, where the virus was first discovered. When Su Won revealed her identity, a heavy silence fell over the entire command center for a brief moment. It seemed they hadn't just found a survivor, but a living library of knowledge. She had to be escorted back to the outpost immediately. Zhao Jiangwo made a split-second decision to raise the security level to the highest priority. Lei Long, he commanded, if you encounter resistance, you are authorized to use any means necessary. Understood. 15 minutes later, the scene shifted back to the base. It now looked more like a top-tier national laboratory from before the cataclysm. Welcome, Dr. Su, Lin Han said, reaching out a hand. He introduced himself as Lin Han and explained that this place was, essentially, a special operations base. I am Su Won, she replied. She spoke softly, though her eyes couldn't help but drift toward a tray of steaming self-heating rice on the table. She was clearly starving. Lin Han pushed the food toward her, telling her to eat first and talk later. Suwon practically lunged at the meal. She began shoveling the rice into her mouth, the heat so intense it brought tears to her eyes, which, to be honest, was perfectly understandable. She swallowed the food down, tears and all. Watching this, Lin Han felt a pang of bitterness in his heart for the world she had endured. 10 minutes later, the meal had vanished. Thank you, she said, her gaze becoming clear and even a bit sharp once again. Now we can discuss our business, but there is no rush. Zhao Jiangwo walked over, holding a sealed bag in his hand. Inside was a grayish-white crystal, the very same one Lei Long had carved from the head of the Ravager. Dr. Su, he began, is this the crystal core you mentioned earlier? Suwon took one look, and her pupils constricted slightly. Yes, that is a low-level crystal core, usually found in Tier 1 mutants. But what exactly is it? We call them high-energy biological aggregates, Suwon replied, shifting instantly into her professional researcher mode. She explained that the Z-virus reorganizes a creature's metabolic system, concentrating energy in the brain to form this crystal. In simpler terms, it was the mutant's battery. A battery. The thought made Lin Han's heart skip a beat as Suwon continued. His entire focus was now fixed on that single word, energy. Subconsciously, he reached out his hand toward the bag. The moment his fingertips brushed against the crystal core through the plastic, a low hum resonated within him. A sudden clarity washed over his mind, and a semi-transparent stream of data flickered across his vision. The system detected absorbable energy, a biological aggregate with 12% purity and significant impurities. It was worth 12 energy points. The prompt asked if he wished to absorb it to upgrade the Level 1 spacetime gate. The upgrade would expand the gate to 5 meters and unlock a dedicated material transport channel. This would finally allow large vehicles to pass through. Lin Han stood frozen, a wave of wild joy surging through him. This was the key. He realized then that the true value of partnering with the state was using their vast resources to hunt mutants and gather these cores. A perfect loop. Comrade Lin Han, is something wrong? Zhao Jiangwo noticed his strange expression. Snapping back to reality, Lin Han suppressed his excitement, knowing this wasn't the place to talk. Chief, I have an urgent report, Lin Han said, gesturing toward the encrypted communication room next door. He needed to explain the use of this crystal. Once the airtight door hissed shut, Zhao Jiangwo looked at him expectantly. Taking a deep breath, Lin Han revealed the truth. The crystal could charge the gate. Yes, it was literally a battery for their portal. The moment he touched it, he received feedback. This object could provide the exact energy needed to upgrade the spacetime gate. With enough of them, he could expand the gate until even tanks could drive through, a statement that changed everything. The entire command center erupted in excitement, and Zhao Jiangwo immediately asked exactly how many were required. Lin Han estimated that if they were all low-level cores like this one, they would likely need about 100. Zhao Jiangwo turned to the tactical map, his gaze landing on a gathering point marked in ominous red. His eyes grew incredibly sharp as he called for Lei Long, ordering the entire Special Operations Brigade to assemble at once. Pointing at the red dot on the map, he spoke with a grim tone, ordering them to surround the entire area. Since these monsters carried the energy they needed, they were no longer just a threat, they were walking resource nodes. From that moment on, the mission changed to a mining operation, and Zhao Jiangwo turned his attention back to the screen. We see Su Wan's live feed as Chun Guofeng suggested that, since her identity was confirmed, she should be moved to the P4 lab. Zhao Jiangwo refused flatly, stating that until they could completely rule out the virus's incubation period and mutation risks, she absolutely could not cross that gate, as they had 1,400 million citizens behind them to protect. He knew they couldn't take that risk, so he ordered the engineering company to finish sealing Outpost 0 immediately. They were to build a fully enclosed medical isolation chamber right next to the room 301 light gate. If she couldn't come to them yet, they would simply bring civilization to her, a logical, if somewhat extreme, solution. After a day of heavy rain and clearing by the special forces, the engineers used thick steel plates to seal every window. Lin Han's voice then echoed through the speakers, telling Dr. Su she had likely realized they were from another world. He explained that for epidemic safety, they couldn't invite her through yet, but she would be perfectly safe in the 301 medical pod. Su-won gave a bitter smile, fully aware that she was a potential carrier, and simply replied that she understood. Taking a deep breath, she noted that as long as she had clean water, it didn't matter where she stayed as she entered the modified room. When she entered Medical Pod 0, she was immediately stunned by the professional setup in the silver-white negative pressure isolation tents. New medical instruments flickered with indicator lights, from ECG monitors and blood gas analyzers to a Luotian CT scanner. Her fingers brushed over the machine casings. They looked a bit bulky, perhaps, but they were brand new and pristine. The equipment was perfectly maintained, and two female military doctors soon guided her to a shower where warm, purified water poured down. Su-won stood frozen under the spray, as if trying to wash away 12 years of apocalyptic memories before the decontamination ended. After changing into fresh hospital scrubs, Su-won lay on a soft medical bed just as the isolation pod's transfer window opened. We see Lin Han standing outside in a protective suit, holding a tray and explaining that General Zhao had given specific instructions. Since her stomach hadn't processed oil in years, her first meal couldn't be too heavy, so he offered a specially prepared nutritional meal. He smiled through the glass, delivering it personally as a greeting from a fellow countryman before revealing a bowl of millet porridge. The tray held 2 boiled eggs and a small bowl of bright, glistening braised pork, which Su-won stared at with total intensity. Across a gap of 12 long years, that familiar aroma hit her like a physical weight. She asked if it was truly for her. Su-won's voice trembled violently, but Lin Han simply told her to eat as much as she liked in a gentle, reassuring tone. She lifted a spoonful of meat to her mouth, and in that single moment, the tension she had held for a decade finally snapped. Her quiet sobbing quickly turned into a loud, uncontrollable cry as she desperately began to shove the food into her mouth. Tears fell into the bowl, mixing with the braised pork as she swallowed. She was, after all, just a survivor of a 12-year hell. She was a normal girl finally tasting the warmth of the human world again, while Lin Han stood silently, offering a pack of tissues. Once Su-won had finished every bite, she wiped her eyes, and when she looked up again, all her previous fragility had vanished. It was replaced by an unprecedented resolve as she looked at Lin Han and spoke with a voice that was raspy yet determined. She told him she understood their fears, and as a virologist, she knew the horrors of the virus better than anyone and would stay. She promised to cooperate with their research and give them everything she knew about this world, glancing briefly toward the wall. She looked toward the wall as if she could see the light gate next door, adding that she had only one request for the future. Lin Han assured her that day would come, before ordering the engineering corps to work 24-hour shifts to finish the modifications on Building 4. He wanted to ensure the soldiers could finally take off their gas masks and breathe freely within the safety of those walls. As construction on Outpost 0 continued at full speed, a cross-world scientific dialogue was officially beginning inside Medical Pod 301. We see the team presenting all the data they had gathered so far regarding what she called the Z-virus. Chen Guofeng's voice came through the communicator as Su-won looked at the data on the screen, her brow furrowing slightly. She noted that the data was far too shallow, explaining that the Z-virus acted more like a biological machine than a simple pathogen. That was its disguise, she explained. It didn't just rewrite DNA, it completely restructured the host's entire energy metabolism system. This was why zombies could survive without eating, and why high-level mutants were capable of releasing devastating energy attacks. It was all because of the essence cores inside them, a term that made Lin Han perk up as he held the crystal from the Shaper's head. He asked Dr. Su if, as a virus expert, she happened to know the specific composition of the object in his hand. Su-won's expression grew solemn as she admitted she only understood part of it, noting that his was a low-grade core with many impurities. Its main component was an unknown biopiezoelectric ceramic, leading Lin Han to press her on what practical use it might actually have. Su-won fell silent for a moment, appearing to hesitate before revealing that in her world, some people tried to use it for themselves. They would inject essence core extract to strengthen their bodies, though her father always opposed it due to the staggering mortality rate. Even if one survived, the risk of mutation was extreme, making the substance incredibly dangerous, which only made Lin Han smile. He told her not to worry, as they weren't interested in biological enhancement, but rather the core's unique physical properties. He suggested they put it to the test, and while Su-won watched with confusion, he took a deep breath and prepared himself. Placing his hand against the glass, he stared intensely at the essence core and silently commanded his system to absorb it. A second later, Su-won watched in absolute shock as the grayish-white core in his hand suddenly began to glow with light. Wisps of pale blue light began to leak from the essence core, effortlessly penetrating both the sealed bag and the bulletproof glass. The energy flowed directly into the portal, causing the swirling vortex to accelerate as a low hum vibrated through the entire floor. The light field expanded violently, leaving Su-won to stare with wide eyes, unable to comprehend the principles behind what she was seeing. It was as if the door had simply consumed the core, and when Lin Han opened his hand, only a small pile of grayish-white dust remained. At that same moment, a long-awaited notification surfaced in his mind, confirming the successful absorption of the biological essence core. He had gained 12 energy points, bringing his upgrade progress to 12%, a result that made him tighten his fist in triumph. An uncontrollable smile spread across his face as he turned back toward the stunned Dr. Su. He explained that this was the true purpose of the cores. They weren't a poison to them, but rather a key. Su-won could only mutter the word back in disbelief, while Lin Han pointed toward the glowing portal, explaining that the door was hungry. These cores were its food, and by feeding it, the gate would become larger, stronger, and far more stable. Whether it was Chun Guofeng watching the screen or Zhao Jiangwo in the command vehicle, everyone was deeply shaken by this revelation. The equation was simple. Essence cores were energy, which meant the zombies were essentially mobile mineral deposits. With this realization, the entire strategic situation shifted. The zombies he once viewed as a nightmare had become a precious resource. Zhao Jiangwo's voice crackled through the communicator, asking if Lin Han was certain that only 100 of these cores were needed for the first upgrade. Watching the progress bar in his mind, Lin Han confirmed it, sensing that the upgraded portal would provide them with a massive surprise. Zhao Jiangwo slammed his hand on the table in approval, his decision made. He immediately ordered the special forces to enter a state of maximum readiness and told the engineers to clear an armored path to the gate. If the zombies on the other side were hiding, then they were going to go over there and dig them out. Back in the medical pod, Su-won watched this unfold, reflecting on how her people saw the zombies as harbingers of death. Yet here, they were being treated as a mere resource, a difference in civilization that left her whispering to herself in awe. She realized that our intervention would completely change the fate of her wasteland, not as a rescue, but as a total conquest. The maximum readiness alarm echoed across both worlds as squads of soldiers began pouring out from the glowing portal. They quickly established defensive formations along the streets, reminding everyone that this was not a drill as they checked their gear. Gas masks were sealed and IFF systems activated while heavy weapon teams took their positions. Meanwhile, Leilong stood ready on a rooftop. He held his binoculars with a cold, focused gaze, 2 heavy machine guns mounted behind him and aimed directly down the street. The lure team reported they were in position, and with a steady, powerful voice, Zhao Jiangwo gave the order to begin the operation. 500 meters from the outpost, 2 drones hovered in the air, each carrying a high-powered loudspeaker beneath its frame. Suddenly, a song that had been extinct in this wasteland for 12 long years erupted, shattering the silence of the ruins. The deafening music instantly broke the eerie tranquility of the apocalypse, reaching the zombies hiding in every dark corner. Like a disturbed nest of hornets, the creatures began to boil over, their countless roars merging into a terrifying wall of sound. They converged into a massive tide, chasing after the 2 drones. The prey had taken the bait, just as the scout captain intended. He led the swarm toward our lines, while units called out the closing distance. 500 meters, 300, then 200. At 100 meters, Leilong looked down at the approaching horde, counting at least 500 zombies, including several elite variants. Among them were lightning-fast ravagers, but today they were facing a modern army. With a single command, the order was given to fire. The heavy machine guns on the rooftop were the first to roar, spitting 12.7mm rounds that tore through the air with mechanical precision. The lead zombies were instantly shredded into fragments, followed immediately by the synchronized fire of dozens of automatic rifles. A crossfire network covered the entire street. To be honest, this wasn't a battle, it was an industrialized slaughter. The zombies were as fragile as paper, falling in heaps before they could even get close to the defensive line. A Ravager was spotted in Sector 3, and a request for sniper support was called out immediately. With a heavy thud, the Ravager's head exploded like a melon mid-leap. In less than 10 minutes, the street was silent once more. The gunfire gradually thinned out until the street returned to a deathly silence, leaving behind only scattered remains and a thick, pungent stench. Watching through the surveillance monitors, Su-won was left utterly speechless. She had witnessed many desperate zombie tides before. But against these soldiers, the monsters were shockingly fragile, such is the absolute power of overwhelming fire. He walked over to her side. With a hint of pride, he welcomed Dr. Su to a world where truth is defined by the range of one's cannons. Just as the cleanup began, Leilong's voice rang out again, ordering the engineering and chemical defense companies to recover the energy cores before their power dissipated. Dozens of soldiers in hazmat suits rushed from the vehicles, enduring the foul odor as they called out new findings to their captain. They unearthed a red core, likely a level 2, and reports of success kept coming in while he stood before the glowing portal. As bag after bag of bloodstained cores was sent back, the system notifications in his mind began to chime without pause. Level 1 core absorbed, energy plus 12. Another level 1 absorbed, energy plus 11. Then, a level 2 core was processed. Energy increased by 150, and the upgrade progress began to soar wildly until the very last bag of cores arrived. Once they were sent through the portal, the energy charging was finally complete, reaching the current target of 1,000 units. The portal leveled up to rank 2, expanding its dimensions to a customizable 5 by 5 meters. A new feature was unlocked, a stabilized matter transmission channel, along with several high-level permissions. He now had clearance for two-way heavy vehicle transit and the ability to migrate spatial anchor points. Then, a sudden boom echoed. The original humanoid vortex of light suddenly erupted with a dazzling blue glow. Once the light faded, something new appeared. Before them stood a rectangular screen of light, its edges straight and its surface as stable as a mirror, a true interstellar gateway. It was embedded into the bedroom wall, though the room was so small the light screen pressed tightly against the ceiling and floor. The system detected the confined space and automatically adjusted the portal's size to fit the environment. While its maximum size was 5 meters, he could now use his thoughts to adjust the portal's dimensions at any time. He looked at the massive wall of light, a faint smile playing on his lips, before turning toward the communicator to speak. "Chief, the gate is open, and it's even larger than we anticipated," he reported, noting that the ceiling was now the only limit. The current space was simply too small for such a grand entrance, and it was clear they needed to find it a new home. On the other end of the communicator, Zhao Zhengwo watched the screen with a sharp glint in his eyes, asking if the portal could now be moved. He nodded in confirmation. While it couldn't be placed just anywhere, he could relocate it to any wall in the immediate vicinity. As long as the surface was large enough, the gate could fully expand, prompting Zhao Zhengwo to stand up abruptly with a look of resolve. He ordered the engineering department to initiate Plan B immediately, a pre-established second-phase strategy for this very moment. An engineering unit had already secretly taken over the residential area's underground air raid shelter, transforming it into a subterranean fortress. Over in World B, Leilong received the order for Outpost 0 to prepare for a full evacuation of Unit 3020. As the soldiers began dismantling the defensive fortifications, Su-won asked with a look of confusion where exactly they were going. She felt it was a pity to abandon a defense system that had only just taken shape, but he knew better. He smiled at her through the shimmering light of the portal, explaining that their new destination was a true, impenetrable bastion. With a mysterious grin, he added that they needed to make room for some much larger equipment before sending her to the parking garage. The migration began swiftly. In the real world, a massive concrete wall was cleared within the underground base to serve as the new anchor. Meanwhile, in World B, the combat engineers cleared a wide open space at the entrance of the underground parking lot. Coordinates for both worlds were calibrated, the structural integrity of the wall was verified, and all personnel moved to safe zones. Inside Unit 3020, he took one last look around the room before commanding the portal to retract with a simple thought. The rectangular screen of light instantly shrank into a streak of radiance and vanished into his device, and with that, he turned to leave. Escorted by special service personnel, he headed straight for the entrance of the underground air raid shelter to complete the transfer. 10 minutes later, he stood before the massive concrete wall in the real-world facility, flanked by Zhao Zhengwo and a team of researchers. He took a deep breath and pressed his palm against the cold surface, causing a vibrant, deep blue glow to erupt once more. The portal instantly expanded to occupy the entire wall, forming a perfect square of light 5 meters high and 5 meters wide. Standing before it, a person seemed utterly tiny. This was the level 2 form of the Twin Gate, and Zhao Zhengwo watched from the platform. His heart raced as the report came in. The passage test was complete, and the other side opened into the parking entrance of Jinxiu Garden. The space was wide and free of obstacles, which was perfect. Zhao Zhengwo picked up the red command phone and identified himself. He gave the order for this steel torrent to enter, and suddenly, the earth began to tremble as the first vehicle appeared. It was a Type 99 main battle tank, a 55-ton king of land warfare, advancing with its head held high, so to speak. That long, thick 125mm smoothbore gun radiated a sense of pressure that was, quite frankly, absolutely suffocating. Behind it came a second, then a third, until an entire tank company followed by infantry fighting vehicles and self-propelled artillery. Heavy military trucks loaded with supplies followed. This was the true power of a nation, a literal crushing blow against a lower dimension. Their destination was Outpost 0. The first Type 99 tank, carrying an unstoppable momentum, crawled slowly toward the Gate of Light. The shimmering surface of the portal rippled as the massive hull of the tank was swallowed bit by bit into the other world. On the other side, the dim entrance of the underground parking lot was suddenly illuminated by two massive beams of light and a roar. The Type 99 tank charged out of the wall like a steel beast, followed immediately by a second vehicle and then a third. A fully mechanized heavy armored unit was appearing, almost miraculously, in the middle of the post-apocalyptic ruins. Suwon stood in the corner, completely frozen. She knew they were strong, but she hadn't imagined they were this powerful. Tanks, and top-tier main battle tanks at that, were now rolling through the depths of a dusty underground parking garage. The echoes of the engines drew out the local residents, as a dozen zombies came swaying out of the darkness with hungry growls. Among them was a massive, mutated giant bell zombie, but the lead Type 99 tank didn't even bother to rotate its turret. It simply maintained its speed and drove straight over them. There was a series of wet, heavy thuds and sickening crunches. A bone-chilling sound of shattering skeletons filled the air as the tank crushed the ordinary zombies and the giant bell alike. Before 55 tons of cold, unyielding steel, there was no difference at all. They were instantly reduced to a mess of flesh and bone. This is what we call a steel torrent, a literal crushing force. Lin Feng stood atop an armored vehicle, watching the display. He looked at the stunned Suwon and spoke. Dr. Su, let's start over. This is the first development office, also known as the base. He pointed to the endless stream of armored vehicles behind him with a slight smile. And this, as it turns out, was only the beginning. The thunderous roar of the engines soon attracted every zombie within 2 kilometers. They gathered like a dark, grayish-black tide. They surged frantically toward the entrance of the underground parking lot. Report, radar detects a massive biological heat signature approaching. The count exceeded 3,000 and was still rising. Inside the command center, the communications officer's voice rang out. Though the report was urgent, Zhao Jiangwo didn't even blink. He calmly gave the order, noting it saved them from searching building by building. Let them get closer, he said. Order the armored units to block the entrance and open fire at will. At the parking lot entrance, 3 Type 99 tanks lined up, forming a literal great wall of steel to block the way. Behind them sat the infantry fighting vehicles, waiting as the first wave of the screaming horde finally arrived. Several high-speed hunters leaped into the air, attempting to launch an ambush from above. The commander of the lead tank watched them coldly. Suddenly, the 12.7mm machine guns on the roof began to roar. The anti-aircraft guns fired first, followed immediately by the 30mm cannons and heavy machine guns in a synchronized chorus. Dense tracer rounds wove together into a web of death. Those hunters caught midair. They were instantly shredded into a fine mist. The front row of zombies fell like wheat before a scythe, while the tanks further back prepared to join the fray. The bodies kept piling up, and the fire continued. High-explosive 30mm shells detonated in the heart of the crowd. Each blast kicked up a storm of gore. Not a single zombie could get within 20 meters of the ramp. This wasn't a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. 40 minutes later, the gunfire finally began to fade at the slope of the entrance. A mountain of corpses 2 meters high had formed, and several engineering vehicles rumbled forward to clear the path. The engineering vehicles pushed the corpses aside like common trash, clearing the way for the recovery teams in hazmat suits to enter. They began skillfully searching for crystals. Level 1 confirmed, another Level 1 confirmed, and then a Level 2 crystal. One team member excitedly held up a blood-red stone, noting that this particular brute had a rare red crystal in its skull. As for that unlucky brute, Suwon stood atop the command vehicle, staring blankly at the scene. In her memory, a zombie tide meant only one thing. It meant death and despair, but today, those terrifying monsters were being handled like raw materials on an assembly line. They were efficiently slaughtered, cleared, and recycled. She wondered to herself if this was the true power of the state, and we know this was only the start. Lin Feng appeared by her side at some point, handing her a cold soda. He remarked that once the Air Force arrived, things would get serious. He told her that once the missiles started raining down, she would see what true fire support looked like. Suwon took the drink, feeling dazed. She felt a sense of unreality, but Lin Feng pointed toward the distance, telling Dr. Su that her real battlefield was over there. The engineers were working with incredible speed, assembling a series of white, modular cabin structures right before their eyes. Suwon followed his gaze, and her eyes instantly widened. It was AP3, Level Mobile Biosafety Laboratory, a rare sight indeed. Lin Feng smiled, explaining that they had brought in an entire integrated set. Suwon's hands began to tremble slightly. She understood the value of such equipment all too well. It meant electricity, water, supplies, and, most importantly, absolute security. For a scientist, this was paradise. She claimed that with this equipment, she could finally perform a deep analysis of the crystals. The crude methods used by the Black Steel Group were dangerous and inefficient. She asked for 3 days to show him the difference. With the data she had brought out, she was certain she could identify the energy components and find a safe way to utilize them. A spark of passion returned to Suwon's eyes. This was what real scientific research looked like. Lin Feng simply nodded in approval. He watched the cleanup of the battlefield as several high-power searchlights flickered to life on the rooftops of the residential buildings. The light pierced through the darkness that had held Haishan City for 12 years, signaling the return of human civilization. The area was finally safe. Lin Feng took a deep breath, declaring that from this day forward, everything within 2 kilometers of this building was their absolute territory. As night fell, several high-power searchlights pierced through the darkness of Haishan City, marking the moment Base Zero truly took root. We move now to the Haitian City Water Plant number 3, the largest den of vice and a literal devil's vault in this wasteland. High walls were topped with electrified wire, while heavy machine guns and searchlights stood guard on the watchtowers. Inside, Lee Sun frowned as he tasted his meal, noting that the texture of this batch of luncheon meat wasn't as good as the last. He ordered the scavengers to check the basements in the foreign district next time, where unexpired imports might still be found. Brother Sun, as he was called, sat there while his subordinates confirmed the status of the latest shipment of human cargo. The reports continued, confirming the arrival and processing of these human goods, one batch after another, in a grim routine. It was a cold, mechanical process, checking the inventory of lives as if they were nothing more than spare parts for a machine. The confirmation of the human cargo echoed through the room, a stark reminder of the brutal reality of this place. Lee Sun repeated his instructions for the search teams to find better supplies, clearly more concerned with his palate than the cargo. His beautiful secretary responded with a trembling voice, just as a series of urgent, heavy knocks suddenly echoed at the door. Lee Sun's gaze turned cold instantly. He had a strict rule about not being disturbed during dinner, and he made his displeasure known. A panicked henchman rushed in, looking terrified. Lee Sun gave him a dissatisfied look, wondering what could possibly justify such a scene. The man stammered about trouble outside, asking if those mad dogs from the Wild Wolf gang were harassing the water trucks again, or perhaps those religious fanatics were setting another trap. The subordinate swallowed hard and simply pointed toward the window. He suggested that Lee Sun see it for himself. With a cold snort, Lee Sun walked over and yanked the curtains open, and then he froze. The wine glass in his hand hit the floor with a sharp shatter. His pupils contracted as he stared fixedly at the horizon. About 5 kilometers to the southeast, a blinding pillar of white light shot straight up into the dark clouds above. In the middle of these pitch-black ruins, the light looked incredibly bright and utterly fearless. To be honest, it was a challenge to the world. That's the Jinshio residential area near the high school, Lee Sun muttered, squinting. He knew that place was supposed to be a zombie death zone. Who would dare to turn on the lights there? His subordinate's voice trembled as he reported that it wasn't just the lights. Half an hour ago, the sound of dense explosions and heavy gunfire erupted. It was so loud it felt as if an entire army had entered the city. A low, heavy explosion echoed clearly through the air, vibrating the bulletproof glass until it rattled in its frame. Lee Sun's expression shifted completely. As a veteran, he was far too familiar with that particular sound. He muttered to himself in disbelief that those were 30mm high explosive rounds, and that rate of fire, it was unmistakable. That rhythm belonged to the autocannon of an 04A infantry fighting vehicle, accompanied by the distinct roar of a 12.7mm anti-aircraft machine gun. In this wasteland, where even a single rifle bullet is treated as hard currency, who could possibly possess such organized heavy firepower? Could it be the remnants of the federal government? Lee Sun immediately shook his head, dismissing the thought as impossible. We learned that the Haitian military district was overrun by the World Nest 8 years ago, a fact Sun had personally confirmed himself. Could the Wild Wolf gang have unearthed a pre-war armory? Lee Sun let out a cold sneer, thinking of their leader, Lei Hu, as a mere brute. If you gave a man like Lei Hu a cannon, he'd probably just use it as a hammer. Besides, even with a gun, he wouldn't have the shells. He pointed toward the pillar of light and the unending gunfire, his fingers trembling slightly. Just listen to that noise. They had been firing for nearly an hour. That was saturation fire, and the amount of ammunition being spent every single second was enough to buy 100 slaves. Even in their prime, they wouldn't have dared to be so wasteful. It was pure madness. But after the initial fear came a deep, gnawing greed. A predatory glint flashed in Lee Sun's eyes like a hungry wolf. Whoever was over there was sitting on a massive treasure, perhaps a hidden armory, or even a functional power facility. It might even be a stockpile of refined supplies. Lee Sun stopped pacing, regaining his usual icy composure, though his excitement remained. Despite his calm exterior, the fanaticism in his eyes was hard to hide. He ordered Yi Zhao's squad to mobilize immediately. His subordinate shuddered. Yi Zhao's team was their elite, but against heavy firepower, sending anyone else would be a death sentence. Lee Sun spoke coldly, commanding Yi Zhao to lead the team and take their best gear, night vision, silencers, the works. He even ordered them to take the few prized Gauss rifles from the collection. Pausing, he pulled a single vial from his drawer. The liquid inside shimmered with a faint blue light as he tossed it to his subordinate, telling him that if Yi Zhao encountered a real threat, he was authorized to use serum number 2. The subordinate caught it with trembling hands. He knew this was a berserk potion capable of massive power boosts. However, the side effects were devastating. The mission was simple: find out exactly who or what they were dealing with. Lee Sun walked to the window, watching the pillar of light as he made a throat-slitting gesture. If they were powerful travelers passing through, they would play the humble servant and negotiate. But if they were just lucky scavengers who had stumbled onto a gold mine, his lips curled into a cruel smile. In that case, he intended to devour them whole, skin and bones. Every single bullet over there, and every scrap of metal belonged to Black Steel. Meanwhile, just 2 kilometers away from the Jinshio Garden, we find the Wild Wolf gang's lair. It looks like a savage wasteland, with walls built from the rusted husks of scrapped cars. The skulls of mutated beasts hang everywhere. Right now, the camp is deathly silent as everyone gathers on the walls, staring in stunned silence at the distant firelight. The burly Lei who stands at the highest point of the fortifications. He grips a battered monocular telescope, staring fixedly toward the light. One of his men suggests taking some nail guns to scavenge the remains, but who knows, a single shell from that side would leave nothing left of them. He lowers the telescope, forcing himself to stay calm. As a local warlord, he has survived this long by relying on an instinct sharper than a mutant rat's. When that pillar of light first ignited, he felt a cold sweat break out, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. It was a feeling of utter helplessness against a higher dimension of power. He immediately ordered everyone to stay hidden in their holes. He commanded them to douse every fire. If anyone dared to move toward that light, he promised to skin them alive himself. And there was more. He ordered the outer sentries to pull back 200 meters. He didn't want those gods over there to think they were looking for trouble. His subordinates watched their usually arrogant boss acting so terrified, and a heavy, fearful silence fell over the entire gang. Lei gazed at the towering pillar of light with eyes full of awe and dread. The world is changing, he whispered to himself. He muttered that the balance of power in Haishan was shifting, and soon, neither Black Steel nor his own gang would be the loudest voices in this territory. The authority now belonged to those ruthless people over there. In the dark of night, the wind howled, carrying the distant, blood-chilling cries of mutated beasts. Suddenly, a dark shadow leaped from the overpass like a ghost, followed immediately by a second figure. It was Yi Xiao's squad. The captain, Yi Xiao, dropped to one knee and signaled for a halt, checking his tactical watch with practiced precision. The hands pointed to 2 in the morning. Jinxiu Garden was just ahead, and Yi Xiao spoke in a low whisper through his throat mic. He warned them of the strong light source in the target area and ordered them to stay hidden. Just then, the sound of gunfire finally ceased. The voice of his vanguard, Feng Dong, crackled through the earpiece, suggesting that the fat sheep over there had finished their little war. He assumed they were now exhausted and sleeping soundly. Don't be careless, Yi Xiao reminded him coldly. Anyone making that much noise was certainly no ordinary group of survivors. The boss had been clear. This was a reconnaissance mission to gauge their true strength. However, if the enemy's guard was down, he touched the poisoned dagger at his waist, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Then they would snatch a prisoner to bring back for questioning. Yi Xiao was confident. As a Tier 1 speed-enhanced evolver, his neural reaction speed was 3 times that of a normal human. In his mind, no matter what heavy firepower the enemy possessed, nighttime urban combat was still the domain of purifiers like them. To him, things like tanks and cannons were nothing more than sitting targets in the ruins. Move out, he commanded, and the 5 shadows vanished instantly, using the debris as cover. They began to creep steadily toward the towering pillar of light. Meanwhile, back at the base command center, our protagonist sat comfortably, slurping down a bowl of instant noodles. He watched the massive high-definition screen, which displayed a crystal-clear, gray-white thermal imaging feed of the perimeter. 5 distinct human silhouettes were currently attempting to infiltrate. Beside the image, the system even displayed their real-time biological data. The lead target had a heart rate of 85 and a temperature of 37 degrees, armed with a high-hardness alloy blade. The system flagged a suspected biochemical toxin at his waist. Target B, the Vanguard, showed a slightly more nervous heart rate of 92. He carried a short-barreled firearm and possessed abnormal muscle density, marking him as a suspected strength-type evolver. This was the man known as Yi Xiao. Leilong curled his lip in disdain. To be honest, this level of stealth was amateur at best. In our Special Operations Brigade, they wouldn't even pass the first round of trials. Look at the one on the left, sticking his rear up so high. It's as if he's begging a sniper to take the shot. For apocalypse survivors, they aren't doing too badly, Zhao Zhengwo remarked while holding his teacup. His tone was flat as he noted their use of terrain and formation, even wearing leather suits designed to block thermal imaging. Unfortunately for them, their equipment philosophy is stuck 20 years in the past. He pointed to a small red dot on the screen. Our Windbird microdrone is hovering just 100 meters above their heads, and they haven't noticed a single thing. This is what we call a generational gap. That so-called anti-thermal leather is about as effective as a pair of transparent stockings against military-grade radar. Should we take them out, Chief? Leilong asked, seeking his orders. The sniper team has already locked onto every target. With one word, we could make their heads burst in under 3 seconds. Don't be in such a hurry, our protagonist said, swallowing a bite of beef. Since Black Steel sent us these birds, we have no reason to turn them away. Didn't Su Wan say she was short on experimental subjects? These evolvers will be perfect for her to slice up and study. Pardon me. I meant collaborate on research. Zhao Zhengwo nodded, agreeing to take them alive. If they wanted to make an example of someone, then they would show these people the true meaning of modern warfare. The order was given. Special Ops Team 1, close the net. Meanwhile, Yi Xiao suddenly felt an inexplicable chill. It was the sensation of being watched by some terrifying, prehistoric predator. As an evolver, this intuition had saved his life countless times. Yi Xiao came to a sudden, jarring halt. He instantly ducked beneath the chassis of an abandoned bus. What is it, Captain? His team asked. Something is wrong, he replied. It was too quiet. Yes, far too quiet. They had already penetrated within 300 meters of the light source, but they found nothing but a deathly silence. "Captain, look over there," the assaulter suddenly cried out in alarm. Yi Xiao followed the direction of his finger, his pupils shrinking instantly. There, in the clearing 100 meters ahead, several massive silhouettes were parked there, tanks, but not the makeshift ones modified from bulldozers used by the Black Steel Group. These were true killing machines, boasting streamlined turrets and long, elegant barrels that seemed lethal even while they slept. The overwhelming aura of cold steel made Yi Xiao feel as though he were suffocating. These were actual main battle tanks. Yi Xiao's eyes widened in shock. These were certainly not the crude, clunky vehicles he had seen before. This was a genuine machine of war. To his horror, he suddenly noticed that the turret was beginning to move. The tank's turret rotated silently, and in an instant, the dark, hollow maw of the cannon was locked directly onto them. At that same moment, a crushing sense of dread washed over him. It was too quiet, which meant they had been spotted long ago. "Retreat, get out now." Yi Xiao practically roared the command. This was a trap, and he turned to flee immediately. All of his previous confidence had vanished into thin air. However, it was already too late. The moment they turned, they were finished. A muffled gunshot rang out, and Yi Xiao felt his right hand suddenly grow light as a piercing, agonizing pain shot through him. His tactical knife and half of his palm were shattered by a heavy caliber round. The sniper was at the 2 o'clock position. 2 more shots echoed through the air, and the weapons held by 2 of his team members were sent flying from their hands. "Who's there? Come out and fight me one-on-one." The assaulter, Mad Dog, let out a furious roar and pulled out a red injector. He slammed the needle into his own neck with desperate force. And then, he simply collapsed, falling straight to the ground. "Damn it," Yi Xiao cursed as he watched his teammate go down. A flicker of desperate madness crossed his eyes. Since there was no way to run, he decided he would fight to the end. The muscles in his legs tensed as he launched himself forward like a bolt of lightning. Yet, the very moment he started to move, blinding beams of white light suddenly erupted from all directions at once, cutting through the darkness. The area was illuminated as bright as day, instantly blinding Yi Xiao. He let out a cry of pain and fell to the ground. Clutching his eyes, he tumbled into the dirt. "Welcome to Base Zero," a cold voice announced over a loudspeaker. "Welcome to the scene of an information age war of annihilation." Yi Xiao fought through the searing pain, forcing his eyes open just a crack. There, he saw a sight he would never forget. Dozens of fully armed soldiers had appeared around them, as if from thin air. They were impeccably equipped, their rifles adorned with various high-tech attachments that he couldn't even begin to name. Dozens of red laser dots danced across his body and those of his teammates, while directly in front of them, the situation grew even grimmer. That massive main battle tank had, at some point, already finished rotating its turret toward them. The thick, 125mm smoothbore barrel was pointing coldly at his head from a distance of less than 20 meters. Using a main battle tank to target a man holding a dagger, it was complete and utter overkill. He felt a sense of total despair. Everything Yi Xiao had once been proud of felt like a joke in the face of these steel beasts and infrared scopes. Don't fire." Yi Xiao slowly raised his hands before that barrel, which was more than capable of turning him into dust. He slowly sank to his knees, whispering his surrender. 10 minutes later, we find ourselves in the underground interrogation room of Base Zero. Yi Xiao's once arrogant squad now looked like plucked chickens, their limbs securely locked into interrogation chairs. When the commander entered, Yi Xiao's head was hanging low, his eyes hollow. "Lift your head," a voice commanded firmly. Yi Xiao looked up with trembling eyes to see a man who looked far too young for his position. "Allow me to introduce myself," the man said, taking a sip of coffee. The man smiled. "My name is Lin Han, and I am the master of this place. To be honest, I find your group quite interesting. I'm particularly curious about these evolver abilities." He set down his cup and pointed toward the laboratory behind the one-way glass. Lin Han's smile remained bright, but to Yi Xiao, it looked more terrifying than any demon. "Now, tell me something. Before those high-level executives at the Black Steel Group sent you here, did they mention exactly how they wanted to die?" An hour passed in the silence of the Base Zero interrogation room. The wound on Yi Xiao's hand had been treated. However, the lingering pain served as a constant reminder of what had just happened. On the other side of the one-way glass, Su-won held a test report, her brow furrowed in deep thought as she listened to the commander speak. He repeated the same sentence over and over, his mind clearly struggling to process the reality of his situation. Su-won remained on the other side of the one-way glass, holding a test report that detailed everything that had just occurred. Her brow was furrowed as the results came in. Lin Han stepped into the observation room, and Su-won handed him the report. Her voice carried a hint of pity as she explained that these so-called evolvers were nothing more than a complete and utter scam. Su-won pointed to the cellular micrographs on the report, noting that while their cell activity was 5 times higher than a normal person's, it wasn't a natural evolution at all, but rather a forced ignition caused by a virus. Yes, it was literally being burned away. To make it easier to understand, Su-won used a simple metaphor to describe the violent reaction happening inside their bodies. Lin Han raised an eyebrow, realizing that the Black Steel Group's creation project was actually just mass-producing people with incredibly short lifespans. They weren't just short-lived. They were mobile biochemical bombs, Su-won added coldly, noting that the modification was entirely irreversible. It seemed a man named Li Sun was treating these people as nothing more than disposable consumables. Lin Han nodded, understanding the gravity of it. A faint smile played on his lips. This intelligence was far more valuable than any defense map they could have provided. With that, Lin Han took the report and walked back into the interrogation room, tossing the document directly in front of Yi Xiao. Take a look. He pulled out a chair and sat down, informing the prisoner that this was his medical examination report. Yi Xiao picked it up, looking dazed. Though the complex medical data was beyond him, he could certainly recognize the final conclusion written in bold red letters. The diagnosis was grim: severe cellular exhaustion and signs of an imminent genetic chain collapse. His estimated remaining life was less than 3 years. Yi Xiao's voice trembled as he asked what this was supposed to mean. It meant that his pride and joy, the divine blood, was actually a lethal poison. Lin Han gestured towards Su-won behind the glass, introducing her as his chief scientist who had analyzed the blood. The so-called strengthening agents the Black Steel Group had injected into them were, in reality, just overdrawing their very lives. They felt stronger, yes, but they were merely burning the last of their candles. Yi Xiao stammered that it was impossible, that his leader had promised otherwise. He insisted this was the medicine of evolution and the mark of a new humanity, suddenly standing up in a fit of desperate denial. But the handcuffs jerked him violently back into his chair. He shouted that Lin Han was lying just to break his will, but Lin Han only let out a cold laugh. He asked if the man hadn't felt it himself, the extreme weakness after using his power, the agonizing bone pain at night, and of course, the increasingly uncontrollable thirst for blood. Yi Xiao froze, his face turning a deathly, sickly pale in an instant. Every single symptom Lin Han mentioned had struck precisely at the heart of his deepest, most private fears. He had always told himself this was simply the price of evolution. To be honest, he never imagined it was actually a countdown to his death. They had been lying to them all along. Yi Xiao muttered to himself, the light in his eyes completely extinguished as his faith collapsed. But it wasn't all bad news. Lin Han suddenly changed his tone, noting that while the process was irreversible, there was still a chance if he cooperated. He suggested that Dr. Su might find a way to delay the process, perhaps even allowing him to live like a human being for his remaining days. Yi Xiao snapped his head up, staring intensely at Lin Han. He wanted to know the price. Lin Han wanted everything on the third water plant. Leaning forward, Lin Han locked eyes with him, demanding the defense maps, the fire points, and the full personnel deployments. He wanted it all, including Li Sin's hiding place. Half an hour later, we find ourselves in the command center. A detailed defense map of the third water plant was already being projected onto the large screen. It was quite an impressive haul. Zhao Jiangwo looked at the dense clusters of firepower on the map with a grim expression. There were 3 distinct lines of defense. Over 2,000 sleighs were being used as human shields, backed by 300 fully armed soldiers. And that wasn't all. Beyond the armored vehicles we've seen, they were even hiding a pre-war, top-tier Storm-class Tiltrotor attack helicopter. While its firepower was fierce, they lacked the specialized high-energy solid fuel required to keep it in the air for long. A single flight would consume half a warehouse of their reserves, so they naturally couldn't afford to use it under normal circumstances. According to Yi Xiao's confession, the core strength of the Black Steel Group included those 300 soldiers and about 50 others, evolvers just like him. The strongest among them was the security captain, Butcher, a second-tier strength-enhanced individual. Supposedly, he could flip a car with his bare hands, though, in front of a heavy machine gun, flipping a car has very little tactical value. Leilong chimed in, noting that the real problem was their control over the water source. Zhao Jiangwo then pointed to the intake workshop at the heart of the map. If we launch a full-scale assault, that madman Li Sun might just blow up the equipment. He might even poison the water. After all, that is the only functioning deep groundwater well left in Haishan City. It is also a vital resource for our future development of this world. Therefore, a direct attack is out. We must use strategy. When asked how, Zhao Jiangwo simply shook his head, a cold, soldierly glint flashing in his eyes. It would be a decapitation strike. He drew a red line on the map, aimed straight at the Black Steel Group's core administrative building, a special forces infiltration. By coordinating with a frontal distraction, they could cut off the headquarters before the enemy even had time to react. Zhao Jiangwo turned to look at Lin Han. He asked if Comrade Lin Han hadn't been wanting to test the Xuanchuan gates. Spatial point-to-point traction in a real combat scenario. Lin Han was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. He realized the chief's intent. If they could open a portal directly inside the enemy's base of operations. Zhao Jiangwo smiled slightly, suggesting perhaps the room right next to Li Sin's office. Lin Han studied the map, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just a decapitation strike. It was like holding a knife to someone's throat while opening their front door. He slapped the table, declaring that this would be the most dishonorable special operation in history. And so, late that night, at an abandoned subway entrance 2 kilometers from the third water plant, an elite 12-man squad began their move. They advanced under the cover of darkness. In the very center of the team, being heavily protected, was Lin Han. He asked in a low whisper how much longer it would be. Even in full heavy riot gear with a submachine gun, his heart was racing. This was, after all, a genuine mission deep behind enemy lines. Once they crossed the maintenance tunnel, they would reach the underground ruins. Leading the way was the former Captain Yi Xiao, now acting as their guide. Those ruins had been abandoned for a long time. They sat directly beneath the administrative building, the only blind spot in the base's defense. Lei Long kept his muzzle, aimed vaguely at the back of Yi Xiao's head, coldly telling him he'd better pray that the path hadn't collapsed. Otherwise, he would be the first one buried inside. Yi Xiao let out a bitter laugh, offering no reply. 10 minutes later, we arrived before a thick concrete wall. This is the place. Yi Xiao points upward, explaining that the administrative basement is right above, behind what used to be the generator room. The space is vast, making it the perfect spot to open the portal. Lin Han orders the guards to take Yi Xiao away. Two team members immediately step forward, hooding Yi Xiao and dragging him to a distance to ensure the area is clear. Once the non-essential personnel are gone, Lin Han turns around and lets out a long, shaky breath. He looks back at Lei Long and the special forces. Zhao Jiangwo had strongly opposed him coming, but the spatial anchor must be positioned by the host personally. It is a necessary risk. Everyone, get ready, he says, his voice tight. Despite the tension, there is a newfound sense of absolute determination in his tone. The team fans out into a defensive formation. Lin Han closes his eyes, communicating with the system to deploy. A shimmering blue light suddenly erupts in the pitch-black underground space, forming a massive gate 5 meters wide. This towering portal of light appears out of thin air, and almost the moment it fully takes shape, a cold, murderous aura surges from the other side, the unmistakable scent of steel and gunpowder. Operation Code, Thunder. From the other side of the gate, Zhao Jiangwo's steady, powerful voice commands, attack. The rhythmic, heavy thud of boots begins to echo like thunder. The first wave to emerge consists of 3 Lynx all-terrain assault vehicles, their remote weapon stations gleaming with a deadly, cold light. Immediately following them are 2 full platoons of heavily armed special forces pouring in like a black tide. The spacious underground area is instantly flooded by this torrent of steel being transported directly from Earth. Lin Han quickly steps aside, watching this breathtaking scene unfold before his very eyes. The nervousness in his heart vanishes instantly, replaced by a profound sense of awe and security. We move now to the 3rd floor, where we find the general manager, Li Sun, with his feet propped up on his desk, swirling a half glass of red wine. He notices Yi Xiao hasn't returned yet and asks his deputy for an update. The deputy explains that while gunfire was heard from that direction, it was likely just a bit of futile resistance from the camp. It simply took a little extra time, the deputy says flatteringly, assuring him that Yi Xiao is always reliable. He promises that before dawn, the supplies from that camp and that beautiful girl will surely be delivered to Li Sun's bed. Li Sun lets out a cold snort, remarking that he certainly hopes so, as things have been restless lately. Word is that the savior lord to the west is stirring again, making the situation increasingly unstable. He hopes Yi Xiao brings back enough quality goods to finally expand their armory. To be honest, he was quite ambitious. But as Li Sun begins to relax, he suddenly feels the cold press of several gun barrels against his forehead. A voice as cold as ice rings out in his ear, shattering his peaceful evening in an instant. The voice addresses him by name, warning him that if he doesn't want his head to burst, he must order his men to disarm. Li Sun struggles to open his watering eyes, only to see a group of soldiers so well equipped they look like they're from another world. Behind these formidable warriors stands a figure in heavy riot gear, watching him with a detached, chilling gaze. This is impossible, Li Sun manages to squeeze out from his throat, his voice thick with pure desperation. He wonders where on earth these people came from as Lin Han steps forward, looking down at this fallen tyrant. Lin Han points to the floor beneath their feet and offers a bright, almost cheerful smile. You might not believe this, he says. We simply grew out of your basement. The battle ends quickly, though the post-war cleanup proves to be far more tedious. As the first light of dawn touches the 3rd water plant, this fortress, once ruled by violence and fear, finally finds peace. In the square, the once arrogant soldiers of the Black Steel Group are now huddled on the ground with their hands behind their heads. Stay quiet and don't move, the Special Forces command, punctuating the order with the heavy thud of a rifle butt. The blow lands heavily on the back of a soldier who is trying to reach for a hidden weapon, leaving him trembling as he loses control of his bladder. We see this scene through the eyes of over 2,000 survivors, all huddled together in the far corners of the square. In their numb gazes, beyond the usual fear, there is a flicker of disbelief. In their experience, change usually brings only more pain. To them, a new occupier typically meant a fresh round of massacres or perhaps an even more brutal form of slavery. However, the expected lashings, insults, and executions never arrive. Instead, they are met with something far more surprising. An aroma begins to drift through the air, stirring the most primal of human desires. It isn't the burnt smell of cheap, tough meat. Nor is it the sour scent of moldy bread. No, it is the unmistakable, delicate fragrance of fresh rice porridge. One frail, skeletal old man in the corner of the crowd recognizes it instantly. To be honest, it had been years since he smelled anything like it. His ragged clothes twitch as a sudden light returns to his cloudy eyes, and he stares fixedly at the other side of the square. There, we see several soldiers in protective gear carrying out massive, stainless steel thermal containers. The moment the lids are lifted, clouds of white steam rise into the air. For those who have struggled through 12 years of the apocalypse, this simple white steam is more intoxicating and addictive than the purest drug imaginable. The soldier in charge of distribution turns on a megaphone, his voice cutting through the heavy silence of the square. The sense of peace and order in his tone is something these survivors haven't heard in over a decade. To their ears, it sounds like nothing less than a divine melody from another life. A slight commotion ripples through the crowd, but seeing the armed guards standing watch, they hesitantly hold their ground. A little girl looks timidly at a soldier who approaches her, her eyes a painful mixture of intense longing and deep-seated fear. The soldier kneels down, pulls a sausage from his pocket, and offers it gently, telling her she won't have to be hungry anymore. At that moment, the girl's mother pulls her child close and begins to sob uncontrollably. It seems that grief, like hunger, is contagious. The sound spreads rapidly until 2,000 survivors are weeping over a few buckets of porridge, their hearts finally breaking under the weight of kindness. It was the release of 12 years of suppressed grievance, a desperate catharsis. Meanwhile, in the underground lab behind the administrative building, the atmosphere was entirely different. It felt like a lingering remnant of hell itself. These monsters, and who could even call them human anymore, had left a nightmare behind. These weren't mere specimens, but failed experiments. Humans whose genes had collapsed after being forcibly injected with excessive amounts of essence and extracts. Their physically distorted bodies were soaked in preservative fluid, their unblinking eyes staring out at a world that had utterly abandoned them. This was what they called their god-making project. Leilong stood behind Suni, staring at the hellish scene before them. His voice was terrifyingly cold as he realized they had treated living people like lab rats, simply to test the breaking point of the virus. It wasn't just testing. Suni pointed to a blood-stained experimental log, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and rage. They were attempting to mass-produce purifiers. Lee Sun believed that as long as the technology was scaled up enough, they could eventually filter out a few children of God who could adapt to the viral symbiosis. As for the failures, they became the things inside these jars. The log was filled with dense, meticulously recorded experimental data. Subject 074, injected with 10 milliliters of level 1 essence and extract. The reaction was violent. Blood vessels burst throughout the body, cause of death, multi-organ failure. Then we see Subject 109, injected with 5 milliliters of level 2 essence and extract. Partial skeletal metallization occurred. However, the subject immediately lost control, went berserk, and was cleared. Behind every line of this cold data for Subject 213, there was once a living, breathing human life. Soen took a deep breath and told the others to collect all these materials. She forced down her nausea and anger. To be honest, as cruel as it was, this data was invaluable. It held significant reference value for our research into vaccines and finding safe ways to utilize the essence. We cannot let them have died in vain, she noted. Leilong understood, but then he pointed toward the corner. He gestured to the few trembling Black Steel Group researchers cowering there. Soen gave them a look of icy indifference. She decided to leave them to the survivors for judgment. After all, the families who lost their loved ones deserve the final word. The survivors would certainly be happy to have a little chat with them after all they've been through. Meanwhile, we moved to the top floor of the administrative building. In the general manager's office, which had now become Lin Han's temporary command post, he stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows. He watched the crowds queuing in an orderly fashion below and the construction vehicles clearing the ruins. It was, in his eyes, the first step of rebuilding civilization. Zhao Jiangwo's image appeared on the command terminal screen on the desk. He told Lin Han that he had done an excellent job. He noted that Lin Han hadn't just taken the territory. More importantly, he had won over the people. Sometimes, a bowl of hot porridge is indeed more effective than a gun. Lin Han sighed, agreeing that while the porridge worked for now, keeping their hearts would require much more. To be honest, the real work was only beginning. Zhao Jiangwo then asked if the resources had been tallied yet. Lin Han confirmed the inventory was underway and the results were beyond imagination. He turned toward the busy logistics officer, who reported that the preliminary list was finally ready. Our story now turns to the spoils of war. The officer handed over a tactical tablet. First on the list was the gold. Li Sun had stockpiled approximately 21 tons of it in a secret underground vault. Lin Han nodded slowly, looking at the figures. This massive hoard of gold was a staggering find, even by their standards. In the real world, this represented nearly $1 billion in funds, enough to fill many of the initial holes in the Spark project's budget. Next was the technological equipment. The logistics officer pointed toward 3 silver cases sitting nearby, looking quite out of place in the dusty room. This was the biggest surprise of all. In Lee Sen's private collection, they had discovered a batch of military-grade tactical tablets and a portable server. Lin Han picked up one of the tablets and swiped through the interface. It was a rare moment of genuine technological luxury in a broken world. The system ran perfectly smooth, and he realized this solved one of their biggest headaches. His eyes lit up with a new sense of possibility. With the network protocols and encrypted maps stored inside, they might finally be able to attempt a wake-up call for certain dormant systems. And then, we come to the final and most important discovery, which, naturally, was kept for the very end. The logistics officer's voice dropped to a whisper as he opened the black and gold case in the center of the room. In that moment, a faint, mysterious red glow illuminated the entire office. It was the essence, the very heart of their struggle. The Black Steel Group's entire high-quality inventory from years of looting was gathered right here, neatly arranged inside the case. There were over 30 blood-red Tier 2 Jinha and more than 400 Tier 1 Jinha, all detected as high-purity energy sources. The final count confirmed 32 Tier 2 biological Jinha and a vast collection of Tier 1 biological Jinha. The total was 415, with an estimated convertible energy of 4,800 points plus an additional 4,980 from the Tier 2 units. The current energy reserve sat at 9,780, a figure Lin Han watched as it flickered across his retinal system data. His breath caught for a moment. With nearly 10,000 points, taking down one regional warlord had almost secured the entire upgrade. He now possessed 90% of the energy required for level 3. Having such a massive energy reserve changed everything. It meant he was now a true powerhouse who could open material transfer channels without a single worry. He could transport heavy equipment in a steady stream or use spatial anchors to migrate his forces at will. He could bring the flames of war to any enemy's doorstep. But besides these riches, they found something else in Lee Sen's computer. The logistics officer pulled up a blurred satellite map, showing the world beyond their immediate borders. It was a distribution map of the forces surrounding Haishan City, marking two very critical sets of coordinates. The officer pointed to a red dot on the edge of the map. The first was the lighthouse camp, located in the west of the city. The notes indicated a gathering of pre-war scientific researchers and a relatively complete industrial production capacity. Lin Han's eyes flickered with recognition. That was Su Wan's home. He then asked about the second location. The logistics officer's finger moved toward the city center, pointing to an area covered in a deep, star-red hue. This was the Haishan City Central Hospital, which the Black Steel Group had marked with a massive skull icon. It was labeled as a forbidden zone, but beneath that warning was a line of small text that the officer zoomed in on. He read the words aloud. The suspected location of a Tier 4 mother nest, with Jinha reserves beyond estimation. A brief silence fell over the office as Lin Han stared at that blood-red skull marker on the screen. He could almost feel the terrifying aura radiating from the display. A Tier 4 mother nest. If a Tier 2 Jinha was already this valuable, if a Tier 2 unit provides 150 points, then a Tier 4 nest is beyond imagination. It seems our next objective is already quite clear. Zhao Jiangwo broke the silence from the other side of the screen, noting that before moving on, they needed to digest their gains. They had to secure the Beigang Group's territory, now designated as Forward Base 01. The first fire of human civilization rekindled in this desperate world. Lin Han took a deep breath, knowing full well that this dangerous game was only just beginning. But he was no longer that trembling, ordinary young man. Now, he stood with the weight of a powerful nation behind him. Zhao Jiangwo's steady voice rang out across the screens, issuing the very first military command following the successful occupation. He ordered the first-level combat readiness to be lifted, shifting all units to construction mode to establish a defensive perimeter within 24 hours. Additionally, Zhao Jiangwo looked directly at Lin Han through the monitor, his expression softening just a fraction. He told the mess hall to prepare a special meal tonight, braised pork for everyone at Forward Base 01. A rare luxury, indeed. However, civilization does not mean a free lunch. Both he and Zhao knew that in this wasteland, pure charity only breeds laziness. Only by establishing a system of fair exchange could they truly reactivate the vitality of this long-dead society. We hear the base's loudspeakers crackle to life, broadcasting a clear and powerful announcement across the grounds. The message requested that all healthy adults between the ages of 16 and 55 make their way to the square. They were to gather in front of the Qinxing building for identity registration and labor assignment. The broadcast repeated the instructions once more, its mechanical voice echoing through the streets. Everyone was to assemble at the Qinxing building square to be registered and assigned to their new roles. Surprisingly, there was no great commotion among the crowd. Their only real fear was whether their new masters would be crueler than the last. Old Zhang stood among the people, feeling a deep sense of unease. To be honest, he had seen enough regimes to be skeptical. He was a former senior engineer at the water plant, now in his 50s. Under the Beigang Group, his technical skills had barely kept him alive. But he had merely been surviving, nothing more. His companions turned to him, asking what he thought of these newcomers. What will they make us do? Surely not use us as zombie bait, a young man whispered nearby, only to be told to shut up. Old Zhang shot him a sharp look, asking if he'd ever seen bandits give new clothes to slaves as the line slowly moved forward. We see a young soldier in a black tactical exoskeleton handling the registrations, his presence both imposing and strangely professional. His tone was calm as he asked for a name. Zhang Jingguo. The old man stammered, trying to stand straight as instructed. The soldier looked up, asking what his previous profession was. I was originally an engineer at this very plant, Zhang replied. He explained that later, under the Beigang group, he was forced to repair water pumps and generators. An engineer, then. The soldier's eyes lit up slightly as he tapped on his device. He told Zhang to look into the lens as a soft blue light appeared. The light scanned Zhang's iris, and just like that, his identity profile was established. Zhang Jingguo, 52 years old. Classified as Senior Technical Personnel, ID number 01, T042. The soldier then handed him a black rubber wristband. He told him to put it on, explaining it was his base ID, his wallet, and his health monitor all in one. A wallet? Zhang was stunned. To be honest, money had become nothing more than scrap paper long before the apocalypse. The soldier pointed toward a massive LED screen in the center of the square, explaining that Base 01 didn't use old-world currency. They didn't use slave rations either. Instead, they implemented a contribution point system. Zhang followed the soldier's gaze to the screen. The display was scrolling through various listings on the Base 01 mission publication board, showing a world of new possibilities. Basic labor, such as clearing the battlefield or moving corpses, earned 1 point plus a meal subsidy. A grim but necessary start. Technical roles were in high demand. Mechanical repairs and electrical work paid 20 points a day, which, naturally, caught Zhang's attention. There were even assessments for senior technicians to earn extra stipends. Then there was resource collection, high risk, but very high reward. A Tier 1 core was worth 100 points, while a Tier 2 core fetched a staggering 1,500. A fortune in this new world. On the other side of the screen was a dazzling list of goods available for exchange, starting with the most essential, food. White rice porridge and steamed buns were listed as unlimited supply, costing 50 points per portion. A simple luxury, finally within reach. A 340-gram can of luncheon meat cost 10 points, while the premium braised pork was a special offer. That pork was 50 points a can, while daily necessities like soap and shampoo were a mere 3 points each. Antibiotics like amoxicillin were 50 points a pack, and cigarettes, the ultimate hard currency, were 30 points a pack. Old Zhang watched the screen, utterly dumbfounded, while Ho Jie's mind raced as he quickly did the math. If he took the hardest job moving corpses and handled 10 a day, he'd earn 10 points, enough to eat and drink his fill. But if he could pass the mechanical repair test and earn 20 points a day, everything would change. That meant he could afford a can of braised pork every 2 days. More importantly, the rules here were transparent. As long as you were willing to work, you could live like a human being. To them, this wasn't just a base, it was paradise. Is this for real? Zhang asked with a trembling voice. Actual braised pork? You aren't just tricking us into working. Of course it's real, the soldier laughed, pulling a can of braised pork from under the table and giving it a shake. He explained that with enough points, he could eat as much as he wanted. Their chief always said that here, labor is the highest honor. The more you work, the more you earn. I'll sign up. I can fix pumps. I was the original chief engineer of this plant. Zhang suddenly straightened his back, a spark of life returning to his eyes. He didn't just know how to fix pumps, either. He could fix generators and transformers too. Give me the tools, he pleaded. I can start working right now. The soldier nodded with satisfaction and entered a code into the wristband, telling Zhang to head to Sector B for his assessment. Once he passed, he could start earning that very day. Meanwhile, at the top of the administrative building, we find the temporary command center. The chief stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the bustling scene below. The numb, lifeless look on the people's faces was finally fading, replaced by a flicker of hope, a reason to keep going. It seems humanity's ability to adapt is far stronger than we often imagine. He remarked that it wasn't just about adaptation, though. As Zhao Jiangwo's holographic image appeared on the screen, he noted it was also a deep, desperate craving for order. This point system provided exactly that. Essentially, it was about rebuilding a system of credit, simply making them believe that their efforts would actually be rewarded. The productivity they unleashed was staggering, though we must admit, it was only possible thanks to the state's massive material support. Lin Han smiled, knowing that without those mountains of canned goods and grain acting as collateral, the system would never work. Even he couldn't manage this without that backing. Zhao Jiangwo's expression turned serious as he mentioned the domestic expert teams. They had already conducted a preliminary analysis on the crystal core samples that Lin Han had sent back earlier. The energy density contained within these things was incredibly high, enough to change everything if the conversion mechanism could be cracked. It would be a total disruption of the real world's energy landscape. Therefore, Base 1 had to remain stable at all costs. This place was to be their future energy mine. Lin Han nodded, telling Uncle Zhao not to worry about the situation. He then asked how Su Wan was doing, only for Lei Long to chime in, noting she was even busier than him. She had just handpicked over 30 people from the survivors who had backgrounds in medicine and biology. And there was more. Lei Long paused, a trace of genuine admiration appearing on his face as he continued. The first group of experts from their side had already passed through the light gate to join her in the field. When those old professors from the Academy of Sciences saw the virus samples and mutant slices Su Wan provided, they were ecstatic. Now, they had all burrowed into the P3 lab on the second basement floor, following Su Wan's every command. Quite a sight, really. Su Wan had survived in Mo City for 12 years, so her experience in this field was naturally far beyond their own. The plan was for the experts to learn as much as possible to merge the technologies of both worlds quickly. Lin Han made a small joke about making sure they didn't start a biohazard crisis, but Lei Long remained quite serious. He assured Consultant Lin that they were watching the safety red lines closely. Every scavenging team had to be led by elites. Furthermore, they were focusing on the warriors willing to collect crystal cores, the brave souls of this new world. These people were the perfect candidates for expanding the local auxiliary armed forces. With that, Lei Long gave a sharp salute. Just as he was about to turn and leave, the red alarm lights of the command center suddenly flared to life. A radar operator stood up abruptly, reporting that the reconnaissance radar had captured an anomalous signal. Lin Han and Lei Long turned at the same time, walking quickly toward the electronic map showing the western sector. A high-speed contact was approaching from the national highway, 5 kilometers from the base. The operator pulled up the feed. We see the real-time drone footage, showing a small convoy consisting of 3 off-road vehicles and a heavy truck. They were racing down the abandoned highway, their chassis covered in welded reinforcements, a common sight in this wasteland. It was the direction of the lighthouse camp. Lei Long zoomed in on the image to confirm their identity. It was indeed the lighthouse convoy, but they weren't driving like soldiers on a mission. They looked like they were fleeing for their lives. The vehicles swerved erratically as if something were chasing them. Lin Han gripped his teacup, wondering what their business was. Since guests had arrived, they would have to receive them, though whether they were friends or foes remained to be seen. When neighbors come knocking, one must show the proper attitude. Lei Long stepped forward with a serious expression. He asked Consultant Lin to leave the defense deployment to him. For a first official contact, they needed to show their strength. He planned to position 299A tanks right at the main gate. Since they were coming, they needed to understand the new order. The first step of this diplomatic encounter was to show their blade. To be honest, it was the only language this world understood. They would teach these neighbors how to speak politely. Lin Han felt at ease as we moved to forward base 01. We descend to the second basement level. Only 48 hours ago, this place was a blood-stained forbidden zone under Black Wave. But after his engineers worked day and night to disinfect and renovate the area, the transformation was complete. It had become the most sophisticated location in all of Mo City, a P3 leveled by a safety laboratory. The heavy airtight doors slid open as Lin Han, dressed in a protective suit, stepped into the core area. The grim atmosphere was gone, replaced by top-tier scientific equipment rushed in from the real world. Dozens of precision instruments hummed with a low, steady rhythm, equipment that had been urgently requisitioned from the National Academy of Sciences. The first group of top-tier experts was gathered around Su Wan. One asked if the RNA transcription process of the sample bore any resemblance to the influenza virus, while another addressed her as Teacher Su, hoping for guidance. Another researcher proposed a new theory regarding the muscle fibers of the berserkers. Su Wan looked exhausted, yet she remained in a state of unprecedented, feverish focus. She told Professor Chun that the RNA fragment was actually a trap. The virus possessed an incredible capacity for camouflage, so she suggested he perform the reverse transcription again. Without looking back, she continued operating the electromagnetic microscope, noting that the metallization reaction was a trait only found in Tier 3 mutants. She warned that the current Tier 1 samples lacked sufficient data for blind deduction. As she stood up, she finally noticed Lin Han. A smile broke through the fatigue on her face as she asked what wind had blown him here. He walked over with a smile of his own. He gestured for the elderly professors to continue their work, explaining he had simply come to check on our chief scientist. He asked if she was satisfied with her new equipment. Su Wan didn't just like it. She gently stroked a nearby mass spectrometer with glowing eyes, declaring the place to be an absolute heaven. The lighthouse camp had kept some pre-war equipment, but due to a lack of power and maintenance, most of it was dead, and the rest was prone to constant failure. But here, everything was brand new. Some models were even more advanced than the best she remembered from before the war. It was a reminder that preparation is key. After all, as Lei Long tells it, he had managed to cause quite a stir the very moment he arrived. She led him to the analysis area with a serious expression and handed him a thick, detailed report. Over the last 2 days, she had carefully analyzed the experimental data from Li Sin's so-called God-making project. She admitted that while the people at Black Steel Group were utterly heartless, the massive amount of data they had gathered through human experimentation was, in fact, a massive treasure trove to create their so-called enhanced warriors. They had injected thousands of survivors with varying concentrations of Golden River extract. It was a grim legacy, to be sure. But while she was analyzing the death records, she discovered a strange phenomenon. He opened the report to see what she meant. For words circled heavily in red ink immediately caught his eye. Perception failure. It was a chilling detail, to be sure. She pointed to subject A302. On the surveillance footage, we see a man covered in ulcers, looking utterly defeated. He lay slumped inside a cage full of frantic zombies, yet the creatures ignored him completely, as if they had gone blind. A wave of shock hit Lin Han as he realized the implications. It was a form of invisibility, though not the kind we usually imagine. It wasn't visual. Zombies track prey primarily through smell, locking on to specific pheromones emitted by living creatures. Hearing is their secondary tool. Yet, in the 30 minutes before that subject died, something remarkable happened inside his body. A certain metabolic byproduct had neutralized his living scent. Li Sun and his team of fools had missed it entirely. They were so obsessed with raw power that they labeled this subject a failure and disposed of him immediately. They had no idea they were throwing away the real treasure. Suwon then held up a small spray bottle filled with pale green liquid. She had extracted that specific enzyme and used the gene editing technology Lin Han provided to refine it further. After removing the toxic fragments that caused cell collapse and adding Tier 1 crystal powder as a stabilizer, she had a breakthrough. She called it Mist 1, a pheromone camouflage spray. By applying it to the body, one could vanish from a zombie's world. For 30 minutes, it could completely block the perception of ordinary zombies. He took the cold bottle from her hand, stunned. In this wasteland, a pheromone that avoids the horde is essentially a legal cheat code for survival. A miracle, really. It was an ultimate life-saving talisman built upon countless lost lives. He suppressed his excitement and asked if it had been tested. She confirmed that live tests had already been conducted in the quarantine zone. We see video of a soldier spraying himself and entering a cell. The bloodthirsty zombies didn't react at all. The effective radius was about 3 meters, lasting for a full 30 minutes. There were limitations, of course. The effect was greatly diminished against Tier 2 mutants and above, as they had already evolved. They possessed sharper vision and hearing to assist their judgment. And secondly, the user could not initiate an attack. The moment a violent attack is launched or a gun is fired, the camouflage fails. It was enough, though, as Lin Han gripped the test tube tightly. It was enough to allow their search teams to penetrate deep into the city center, to reach those dead zones they hadn't dared to imagine before. He told Sue once she had done a great service. If this could be mass-produced, its value would rival an entire armored division. Mass production would take time, however, as the current Jinha reserves were insufficient, and improving its effect on high-tier mutants was no simple task. She explained that she needed more data, specifically live data on Tier 2 mutants. He assured her that the data and the Jinha would be found. Suddenly, his tactical terminal vibrated. The intelligence appearing on the screen caused his expression to darken, prompting her to ask what was wrong. The communications team had just used the municipal network protocols left by the Black Dawn group to restore shortwave monitoring around the city. He walked toward the electronic map on the wall. Just 10 minutes ago, they had intercepted a distress signal, a very weak one, at that. It was intermittent and sent via an open broadcast. The frequency code identified it as the lighthouse camp, sending Suwon rushing to the map. She stared at the screen, her voice trembling as she asked what was happening to them and what the distress message actually said. The message was only 4 words. Horde coming. Flee immediately. We see the reconnaissance drone footage as it arrives on the scene. A sizable swarm of mutated beasts was currently laying siege to the outer walls of the lighthouse camp. Without intervention, they were doomed. With the lighthouse's current defensive firepower, they wouldn't survive the night. Suwon gripped the edge of the lab bench until her knuckles turned white. She knew the lighthouse wasn't full of good people. The high-ranking officials who drove her and her father out to hoard resources were still there. They were selfish and cold-blooded, even cutting the power to her father's life support pod just to save electricity. He understood her pain perfectly. He understood the cruelty of human nature in this wasteland all too well, but he never missed an opportunity to seize valuable resources. More importantly, he knew there were hundreds of innocent researchers there just like her father, along with tons of experimental data and blueprints. Those officials might be scum, but that knowledge was priceless. He looked at Dr. Sue and clarified that he wasn't going there to be a nanny. He certainly wasn't going there to be a saint. Currently, Base 01 had guns, food, and medicine, but it lacked something vital. They lacked people, technology, and scientific strength. Everything the lighthouse possessed was exactly what they were missing. Lin Han patted the supply crates, noting they held things the others couldn't even dream of. He wasn't going there for charity. He was going to acquire the lighthouse camp, people and equipment included. He intended to bring it all back. As for those who had bullied her, he promised she would see firsthand how their supposed pride and power meant nothing in the face of absolute strength. He told Dr. Sue to get ready and turned toward the door. To be honest, he had been waiting for an opportunity like this to present itself. A cold smile played on his lips as he told her to bring her Mist No. 1 formula. This time, they were going to bring back her former colleagues in grand style. They were going to let everyone know who the true lighthouse in this wasteland really was. It was a bold claim, but one he intended to back up with force. He then ordered Professor Chen to prepare a level 2 biosafety isolation zone. They needed to be ready to receive a large influx of new live samples and new colleagues. Meanwhile, at the west main entrance's cargo lane, his troops had already established a lethal defense line with interlocking fields of fire. Accompanied by a dull roar, 3 modified off-road vehicles and a battered heavy truck were seen racing toward the base like they were possessed. The guards shouted for them to stop, warning that the area ahead was a military-restricted zone and any further approach would be treated as a hostile act. The convoy didn't slow down, however. A burly man emerged from the lead vehicle, desperately waving a flare gun as a signal for help. Our snipers fired a warning shot immediately. The 12.7mm rounds roared through the air, striking the ground with terrifying precision. The bullets carved deep craters in front of the vehicles, forcing the entire convoy to screech to a violent halt. "Don't shoot! Don't shoot!" they screamed. The burly man scrambled out of the car, shouting that they were humans, a search team from the lighthouse camp to the west, and meant no harm. He pointed behind them, where a massive cloud of dust was erupting on the distant horizon. Something was hunting them, and it was gaining ground fast. Several dark red mutated hounds were approaching at a terrifying speed. They were hunters, and they looked hungry. The man's face turned pale. Being caught by a tier 2 mutant meant a swift, brutal death. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end to come. But then, the canvas covers behind the defense line were whipped away, revealing the grim barrels of 99A main battle tanks as they lowered into position. Accompanied by the roar of autocannons on both flanks, a dense hail of bullets tore through the air, shredding the hunters into a mist of blood. This display of absolute firepower left the survivors of the convoy in a state of shock. They stammered, wondering if this was a regular army from before the war. 10 minutes later, the Falcon search team was disarmed. They could only stare greedily at the sights inside our base, realizing just how far behind they really were. We see the survivors staring at the abundance of electricity and clean water. "Drink up," Leilong said, tossing a bottle to the burly man, who drained it in one go. Leilong loomed over him like an iron tower, demanding answers. He wanted to know who they were, what they were doing there, and why they brought trouble to his doorstep. The man introduced himself as Wang Meng, the deputy captain of the lighthouse camp's security team. They had been sent out on a reconnaissance mission. Word had reached them that the Black Gang had been wiped out, and their leader wanted to see what kind of powerful force had taken over the territory. He admitted he hadn't expected to find a literal god-tier power. "Cut the nonsense," Leilong barked, telling him to get to the point. When asked about the hunters from before, fear crawled back onto Wang Meng's face. He explained that a beast tide had erupted in the western mountains. For some unknown reason, the mutated beasts usually hidden deep in the mountains were charging out. It wasn't just the hunters anymore. There were ravagers, and some had even claimed to see dragons in the sky. "Dragons?" Lin Han asked, stepping forward into the light. Leilong instinctively took a half-step back to let him pass, a gesture that made Wang Meng realize who was truly in charge. "It's the carrion wyverns," the man stammered. Dr. Su approached with a tactical tablet, confirming that Wang Meng was telling the truth. "Our latest signal scans showed the lighthouse camp was indeed surrounded. The hunters chasing them were likely just scouts from the perimeter." Suddenly, Wang Meng froze in disbelief. "Dr. Su, you're still alive." He could hardly believe his eyes, seeing the woman he once knew now standing confidently beside such a powerful figure. Lin Han watched the exchange with a cold, calculating gaze. To him, this wasn't just a rescue. It was a transaction that could double his strength. He cut the reunion short, noting they could catch up later. He asked if they were the only ones who had managed to escape the siege. Wang Meng explained it was a breakout attempt. Their leader had sent several convoys in different directions to find help before the camp was completely cut off. They were the lucky ones who made it through, though those beasts had hunted them all the way here. "Commander Lin," Wang Meng pleaded. The man dropped to his knees with a heavy thud, begging Lin Han to save the lighthouse. There were over 3,000 people still trapped there. He admitted their leaders were far from perfect, but the survivors were innocent, and the camp held invaluable equipment and data that couldn't be lost. Lin Han repeated the number 3,000 as he turned to look at Leilong and Dr. Su. It was a significant figure, to be sure. 3,000 laborers, plus the equipment and colleagues Dr. Su wanted back. It was a deal worth making, and he decided to accept. It was, by all accounts, a profitable deal. Director Zhao Zhengwo approached, flanked by a group of staff officers, and Lin Han gave him a slight nod. Leilong and the others stood at attention, saluting the director as he informed them that the staff department had already finished their evaluation. The personnel and equipment at the lighthouse camp were exactly what they needed. "Leilong," Zhao said, "I'm approving your request for combat." He ordered him to take an armored company and 2 mechanized infantry companies to bring them back, reminding him they wanted people and gear, not ruins. He was told to minimize collateral damage. "Yes, sir, mission will be completed," Leilong replied, a fire for battle igniting in his eyes. Leilong barked into his communicator for everyone to prepare for level 1 combat as the massive garage doors groaned open. 10 Type 99 main battle tanks began to roll out, their heavy treads crushing the ground and kicking up dust that made the earth itself seem to tremble. Wang Meng remained on the ground, weeping with relief as he witnessed the arrival of what could only be described as the ultimate ender of the wasteland. At Forward Base 01, the thick scent of military diesel filled the air. For a scavenger like Wang Meng, this was a rare luxury. To him, it was the most expensive scent in the world. We see him huddled in the corner like a country bumpkin as a dozen fuel trucks arrived. High-grade golden fuel was being pumped aggressively into the tanks of those steel beasts, with stray drops falling to the ground. Seeing that waste made his heart ache. In a wasteland where even low-quality biodiesel was measured in drops, Lin Han's soldiers were far less careful. The sight of a soldier casually discarding a half-empty fuel can shattered Wang Meng's worldview. It was, in his eyes, a sinfully extravagant display. He muttered to himself in a daze, wondering if this was the true meaning of power. "Wang Meng, stop staring and get in," a voice called out. The window of a Mengsure assault vehicle rolled down, and Lei Long, wearing tactical sunglasses, looked down at him coldly. "You're our guide." He was told to get in the back. "Yes, sir," Wang Meng stammered, scrambling into the armored vehicle as the units prepared for departure. Lei Long's deep voice crackled over the radio channel, announcing the target, the lighthouse camp, located 25 kilometers to the west. The operation was codenamed Breaking Dawn, and with that, the earth began to shake as the convoy moved out. 10 Type 99 tanks led the way, while 20 Type 04 infantry fighting vehicles guarded the flanks. Lin Han took his place inside the command vehicle. He watched this steel dragon belch black smoke as it rolled out of the base, ready to tear through the ruins that had choked these streets for 12 years. But our armored beasts had no intention of taking a detour. Up ahead, observers spotted a roadblock of roughly 50 abandoned cars. The scouts delivered their report with clinical precision. "Ram through them," Lei Long ordered, and the response was immediate. The 1,500 horsepower engines let out a deafening roar as the multi-ton tanks surged forward like unstoppable bulldozers. The abandoned cars were crushed into twisted scrap metal beneath the heavy treads, carving a path through the wreckage with violent, mechanical noise. That sudden cacophony stirred the dead city to life. Thousands of zombies began to pour from the side streets like a rising black tide. They lunged directly at the convoy. "Sir, a horde. It's a massive horde," Wang Meng screamed, his face turning a ghostly pale. His panicked voice exploded over the comms, begging them to stop and take cover in the buildings. "What are you panicking for?" Suwon asked. She stared at her tactical tablet, her voice as cold as ice. "Just watch. We won't even need the main cannons for this." The 30mm autocannons and heavy machine guns on the infantry vehicles instantly unleashed a lethal curtain of fire upon the charging dead. The horde was shredded like wheat before a scythe. Large-caliber rounds simply blew the approaching corpses apart upon impact. The treads rolled ruthlessly over the fresh remains. The sound of crushing bone was enough to make anyone's skin crawl, if they were human, anyway. The entire swarm was pulverized before the steamroller of steel. Is that it?" Wang Meng stammered, his 12-year survival instinct shattered. That worldview collapsed in an instant. "This is the difference, Wang Meng," Suwon said, looking out at the long, crimson trail they left behind. She noted that while they used to struggle just to survive, these men were here to conquer. 2 hours later, Lin Han sat in the command vehicle. The convoy sped westward as the scent of gunpowder grew thick in the air. On the distant horizon, the sky was still scarred by tracer fire. They had arrived. Wang Meng pointed toward the skeletal remains of a fortress built into the mountainside, his voice trembling with genuine terror. He identified it as the lighthouse, though the situation was far more gruesome than imagined. Even the reinforced high-voltage walls were failing. This was a greeting from the peak of human industrial civilization. A massive explosion rocked the lighthouse camp, turning the interior into a furnace. Through the drone feeds and intercepted frequencies, the chaos became clear. We could hear the desperation in the voices trapped inside. Wang Meng stayed close to the others. At this moment, he realized just how far they had come and how much blood had paved their way. As the convoy pressed forward, the sounds of the struggle ahead grew louder with every passing mile. Along the way, the signs of a desperate, losing battle became impossible for our team to ignore. The path was clear, yet the atmosphere grew heavier as they neared the heart of the conflict. As they moved along the road, we could finally hear the voices from the lighthouse clearly. Desperate screams echoed through the comms. The eastern wall had collapsed, and the hunters were already inside. Voices demanded to know why the machine guns were silent, only to be told the last crate of ammo was gone. On the command post rooftop, the camp leader, Zhou Cheng, stared down at the tide of monsters slaughtering his people. His knuckles were white from gripping his empty pistol. "It's over," he muttered to himself in total defeat. In his field of vision, thousands of mutants were drowning the final defense line when a massive explosion shook the earth. The great iron gate was torn open by a behemoth. The monsters were in, and the screams of the dying filled the air. Hunters were tearing through the guards' throats. Zhou Cheng gave a bitter laugh, wondering if things might have been different. He regretted driving him away just for some equipment. Suddenly, a massive mutant beast loomed over him. Stepping over the remains of his men, the beast lunged. Zhou Cheng closed his eyes and raised his empty gun. He waited for the end, but instead, a 125mm high-explosive shell detonated at the foot of the mountain. The behemoth and the monsters before Zhou Cheng were instantly turned into a mess of burning flesh and pulverized gore. The earth-shaking blast drowned out the sound of the swarm. What is this?" he stammered, opening his eyes in terror. 10 Type 99 main battle tanks in desert camouflage and 20 infantry vehicles were crushing the ruins like a moving fortress. This steel citadel rolled onto the battlefield as 30mm autocannons lashed out like the whips of the Grim Reaper. The rounds carved bloody furrows through the horde with surgical precision, shredding any hunter that dared to counterattack. This wasn't just a battle, it was a total one-sided massacre, with thermal imaging locking every target into place. Under the gaze of fire control radar, the swarm that once threatened to wipe out the entire camp was utterly smothered by modern firepower. In just 10 minutes, the threat was erased, leaving only charred remains and acrid smoke. Zhou Qing's legs finally gave out from the shock. His pistol fell with a dull clatter as he stared, completely dazed, at the red flag fluttering in the wind atop a tank turret. He broke down into heavy sobs, crying out that the regular army had arrived, that the country hadn't forgotten them after all. We see Lin Han take the megaphone, his cold, steady voice echoing through the silent death zone. This is the Spark Rescue Team. Lin Han announced that he represented the Spark Rescue Team and was taking command. Then, he slowly looked up. His gaze pierced through the lingering smoke, locking onto the trembling figure of Zhou Cheng on the rooftop. "Leader Zhou," he called out. He asked if the leader wasn't coming down to greet his savior, while special ops teams moved quickly to secure every supply point. In this wasteland where life is cheap, their cold steel and hazmat suits looked like divine salvation to the eyes of the refugees. Surrounded by armed guards, we enter the once luxurious hillside villa, which had seen much better days. The air was thick with the stench of sweat and the sour rot of long-term neglect, with wounded survivors scattered everywhere like withered wood. But when they saw the woman standing beside Lin Han, dressed in a pristine, white research uniform, the hall fell into a deathly silence. Voices whispered the name of Dr. Su Wan. On a nearby stretcher, a man with a broken leg, the very one who had betrayed her, began to shake. The former assistant let out a trembling moan and tried to hide in the shadows, while Zhou Qing stood there, looking utterly devastated and awkward. It had only been 3 days, just 3 days since he had driven Su Wan away like a stray dog. And now, she had returned with an elite force capable of leveling the entire camp to the ground. To be honest, the irony was palpable. Zhou Qing's voice was dry and pale as he stammered her name, asking if she was back. Su Wan didn't even give him a glance. That total lack of acknowledgement was more painful than any insult. She simply frowned, noting the poor air quality and broken ventilation. She turned to her elite medical team and began issuing direct orders to establish a quarantine zone immediately. She commanded that the critically wounded be prioritized for treatment, and then she turned her attention elsewhere. Lin Han simply gave a casual wave of his hand, and several sturdy soldiers stepped forward, dropping heavy thermal containers onto the ground. The heavy thud forced the lids open, releasing the seductive aroma of steaming rice porridge and the rich, savory scent of braised pork. Like a sensory bombshell, the fragrance instantly cut through the thick, metallic stench of blood filling the hall. The sound of collective swallowing followed, a chorus of hunger so intense, it was almost haunting. No one could resist their basic instincts now. To celebrate the survival of the light card camp and Dr. Su Wan's return, Lin Han decided to make a grand gesture. He threw his command out like a gift to the starving crowd. Tonight, there would be an unlimited supply of food for everyone. With lean meat porridge and canned braised pork available to all, the frantic cheers of the refugees nearly took the roof off the villa. Voices cried out in gratitude to the commander and Dr. Su Wan, while Lin Han watched Zhou Qing's meager prestige crumble away. As the leader's authority dissolved alongside the distribution of hot porridge, Lin Han walked over and told him there was no need for such despair. He pulled out a brand new cigarette and lit it for him with a crisp click of a lighter. "We aren't bandits," he remarked calmly. He explained that he was there for a partnership. He had the food, and they had the technology. It was a deal where Zhou Qing couldn't lose. Zhou Qing bit down hard on the filter and took a massive drag, letting the thick smoke and intense nicotine flood his lungs. The sensation finally shattered his remaining nerves as he looked at the desperate refugees and the pristine Su Wan, finally accepting his fate. His voice was hollow and exhausted as he agreed to the cooperation, asking the commander what it was he truly wanted from them. He offered anything they had, so long as they could survive, so long as they could live like human beings once again. But Lin Han wanted more than just survival. He leaned in, his cold expression and steady words carrying a weight that demanded total submission. His words struck them like a bolt of lightning, reigniting a spark in their dim eyes. Zhou Qing's body trembled as he prepared to lead the way. Lin Han gestured toward the hidden underground entrance leading to the P4 laboratory, demanding to see what was inside. He wanted to know what treasures were hidden there, things Su Wan couldn't forget, and things the Black Steel Group coveted so greedily. Zhou Qing gritted his teeth and crushed the cigarette butt under his heel. "Please, follow me," he said, seemingly finding a new sense of purpose. Standing a bit taller now, Zhou Qing admitted that while they weren't much for fighting, the lighthouse camp certainly had some scientific heritage. As they moved deeper, the usual grime of the world was replaced by the faint, sterile scent of ozone. This was the P4 laboratory of the former Haitian Biotech Institute, and the final stronghold of the lighthouse camp. Zhou Qing entered the biological verification code, and with a heavy hiss, the alloy gates slid open to welcome them. Under the dim glow of emergency lights, rows of precision instruments and cultivation tanks revealed themselves, their true core assets. Zhou Cheng pointed toward the center of the lab, where a suit of black full-body armor, known as the Titan, stood waiting. This exoskeleton prototype and its specialized terrain systems were the crown jewels of their biotech institute. It was originally designed as a cutting-edge breakthrough, representing the very best of their technological core. We see Zhou Cheng gesturing again toward that imposing black Titan armor dominating the center of the room. It featured a third-generation neural link system, and Lin Han couldn't help but study the steel monster through his visor. Covered in rugged hydraulic lines, the machine possessed a certain cold, industrial beauty that was hard to ignore. Zhou Cheng explained that this was the fourth-generation individual combat system the army had originally planned to deploy. It could grant an ordinary soldier the power to withstand the direct fire of a 12.7mm heavy machine gun. Lin Han gave an honest nod, admitting it was impressive, though Su Wan was quick to point out it was currently just a pile of scrap metal. She skillfully pulled up the console data, coldly noting that they lacked the high-energy batteries required to actually run it. In its current state, it could only take a few steps while tethered to a cable. The moment the power was pulled, it was useless. Without power, it was nothing more than a multi-hundred-pound iron coffin, a fact that made Zhou Cheng stiffen before he walked to a safe. He conceded that energy was indeed their greatest hurdle, but then he carefully produced a small, mysterious object. He held up a black cube, explaining that this single battery could keep the Titan fighting at full power for 6 hours. Its capacity was 50 times the norm, a revelation that caused Lin Han's pupils to contract as he realized what this meant for the real world. Industrial logic would be completely overturned, but Su Wan was quick to cut in again, noting they couldn't actually produce it. Yes, they couldn't make it, and Zhou Cheng bitterly admitted that this technology required an extremely high-standard, dust-free vacuum production line. It also demanded an incredibly stable and massive power supply, along with a complete industrial chain for refining rare metals. In this wasteland world, it was difficult enough to find a single high-quality screw, let alone something as complex as this. It was the crown jewel of industry, and Zhou Cheng looked at Lin Han with a desperate, testing gaze, a final gamble, really. Lin Han simply smiled. These harsh conditions that were impossible to meet in the ruins were perfectly suited for the nation behind him. Zhou Cheng noted that Mr. Lin possessed resources they couldn't even imagine, and perhaps even more than that. He had clearly guessed there was a mysterious transport channel and offered to hand over everything, the blueprints, the samples, and the data. He was even willing to hand over all the scientific researchers under his command to ensure their survival. Zhou Cheng took a deep breath, stating that in exchange, he hoped to retain management rights over the lighthouse camp survivors. Of course, they would nominally serve as a subordinate organization under Lin Han's direct authority. Lin Han interrupted with a faint, knowing smile, asking if he intended to become a sort of local feudal lord. Zhou Cheng shook his head. He only wanted to find a way for his brothers to survive this chaotic world while keeping some dignity. After all, this technology was priceless even before the war, and Lin Han began to circle the Titan armor slowly. The sound of his knuckles tapping against the alloy echoed through the lab as he told Zhou Cheng he had misunderstood one thing. Stopping in his tracks, he pointed out that in business, an asset's value depends not just on itself, but on who the buyer is. It also depends on whether the seller even has the right to refuse, and Lin Han pointed directly at that battery. In Zhou Cheng's hands, that device could only light a few bulbs or serve as nothing more than a very expensive brick. It wouldn't help them defend against the beast tide. Instead, it would only attract nightmares like the Black Steel Group. But in his hands, Lin Han said, his voice rising slightly, the situation would be entirely different. Lin Han declared that he possessed a complete industrial system, hundreds of millions of engineers, and an endless supply of raw materials. The industrial barriers that haunted Zhou Cheng were, for him, merely the cost of electricity to start the machines. He could turn it into mass-produced goods, a shield for humanity, and a light in the darkness, while for Zhou, it remained a death sentence. As for the management rights Zhou Cheng clung to, Lin Han posed a question that cut straight to the heart of the matter. He asked if the survivors, who had just tasted braised pork for the first time, would truly want to keep following their old leader. Would they prefer to go back to eating husks and wild vegetables, or stay with the man who provided meat every single day? Zhou Cheng's face went pale as he realized the people's hearts were already won. This wasn't a negotiation at all. Lin Han took the battery from his hand, calling it a buyout, specifically, a bankruptcy liquidation of Zhou's entire position. He offered two choices: leave with dignity to reason with the zombies, or merge unconditionally into Base 01. Zhou could join the logistics or personnel departments. He would lose his title, but gain clean water and safety. He would have hot meals and a secure bed, and perhaps, if he performed well enough, something even more substantial. Lin Han promised him a truly well-equipped squad of his own to finally realize his dream of protecting the survivors. The hall fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the hum of the servers, until Zhou Cheng finally chose the second option. He bowed his head as if drained of all strength, and Lin Han, noting the wise choice, tossed the battery to Su Wan. He told Dr. Su the items were hers now and urged her to organize the data quickly so they could bring it all home. Through the cross-dimensional communication link, we see Professor Chen Guofeng at the Chinese Academy of Sciences on the other side of the screen. The professor was nearly driven to madness by the brilliance of the design, calling it the work of an absolute genius. Lin Han toyed with the sample and asked what this meant, prompting Professor Chen to point at the structural diagrams. With a trembling voice, the professor explained that before this battery appeared, human energy storage technology had been stagnant. To be honest, whether it was lithium or graphene batteries, humanity had essentially still been living in the Stone Age. Essentially, humanity could never break the limits of chemical energy, but this battery utilizes a unique approach. It uses a special crystal structure to solidify hydrogen atoms into a metallic state within the lattice. This isn't just a battery, it's a miniature, safe hydrogen-nitrogen energy cell with an incredible energy density. It reaches a staggering 5,000 units, a concept that makes current energy storage technology look like a toy. It is over 10 times stronger than any existing battery. We recall Zhou Cheng mentioning a 50-fold increase earlier. He was likely comparing it to the pre-apocalyptic energy systems, or perhaps just the theoretical limits. Professor Chen waved his hand, noting that even being 10 times better is enough to change the entire world. Imagine an electric car with a 500-kilometer range suddenly being upgraded with one of these. The range would reach 8,000 kilometers, lasting far longer than even a traditional gasoline vehicle. More importantly, it solves the biggest pain point, the miniaturization of high-energy weaponry. Professor Chun was ecstatic. Consider electromagnetic railguns and high-energy laser weapons, which previously couldn't be deployed effectively. They used to require a massive generator, but now, a battery the size of a brick is all they need. It would be enough to support a high-intensity urban battle. Lin Han, what you have brought back here is not just a battery. You have brought back the key to opening the gates of future warfare. Lin Han felt a surge of excitement. This was the true meaning of the portal. But what about mass production? Old Chun answered decisively, noting they had the facilities and the State Reserve Bureau's warehouses were overflowing. Once they understood the principles and the catalyst formula, he asked for 3 months. No, just 1 month. He promised to produce the first batch of domestic samples. Lin Han nodded firmly, entrusting the task to him. After disconnecting, we see Su Wan was still busy. Lin Han looked at her and remarked on her generous dowry. She told him not to celebrate too early. The battery is just the power source. The real treasure was the carbon-carbon components. She asked if he really thought an exoskeleton was just a few steel plates and a motor, as massive amounts of code flowed across the screen. This was the crystallization of an entire industrial system, Su Wan explained, her eyes shining as she looked at the massive machine. To power this beast, the scientists of Haishan City had developed a supporting carbon-based chip architecture with incredible computing power. It was 10 times faster than current silicon chips with extremely low power consumption, allowing it to move as flexibly as a human limb. They had even written the third-generation neural ether fluid, a true precursor to genuine artificial intelligence, which is quite a feat. Then there was the holographic tactical eyepiece, which required far more than just simple miniature projection technology. It relied on complex real-time battlefield situational awareness algorithms, and all that code was now sitting right there in their hands. Lin Han realized he hadn't just brought back a battery. He had brought back an entire military-industrial chain, and he intended to use it. He decided that if Haishan City couldn't build it, they would do it in their world, and if their world lacked the means, they would mine and refine the materials here before taking them back, letting the two worlds complement each other perfectly. With that strategy, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. Just then, Li Zhan entered the lab to report that the relocation had begun. After updating them on the progress, his expression turned serious as he mentioned they had found something else while clearing the lighthouse camp. They had discovered a large batch of sealed Formula 2 vials, the same strengthening agents used by the Black Steel Group. Though Zhou Cheng hadn't used them on a large scale, it seemed he had been secretly conducting infection experiments all along. Lin Han turned to Su Wan and entrusted the discovery to her, knowing she was the only one who could handle such a delicate task. Su Wan nodded, promising to analyze the components to see if the side effects could be eliminated to create a trump card against mutants. If the risks couldn't be removed, she would destroy it. Lin Han agreed, his voice cold as he recalled the horrors of the past. He made it clear they didn't need to create a legion of short-lived monsters to defend their home, and Li Zhan understood perfectly. Standing up, Lin Han noted that with the battery technology secured, setting up the servers could finally become a daily priority. He suggested they go inspect their new equipment. After all, it was time to settle the score with the Black Steel Group. And so, we returned to the lighthouse camp, where Lin Han and his team were preparing a grand gift for their future. They had begun a move so thorough it looked like a marching army had swept through the area. "Careful with that microscope," someone shouted. It was a vintage Zeiss, after all. Nearby, others were dismantling server racks, carefully removing hard drives to avoid any static damage. Every culture sample was packed away, regardless of its apparent value. Professor Chin had been very clear, even if it looked like trash, It had to be taken back for analysis. With a level of professionalism that left the floors bare, they even took the whiteboards off the walls. Lin Han watched as Zhou Qing stood by, his face twitching as he saw even the emergency hallway lights being unscrewed. Zhou Qing asked if they really needed the lamps too. Lin Han took a sip of water, his tone making it sound like the most obvious thing in the world. He explained those were long-lasting nuclear battery lights, a bit dated, perhaps, but incredibly useful out in the wild. Waste is a sin, Leader Zhou, he added. Zhou Qing fell silent, feeling a sense of complete and utter defeat. He was finally witnessing the sheer efficiency of a team that treated scavenging like an art form. 2 hours later, the refugees leaned against the windows of the buses, their eyes filled with unease as they wondered where they were being taken. They had heard rumors of a Base 01 and could only hope for a hot meal. But then, the high walls and bright lights of the base appeared. As Base 01 came into view, the interior of the bus erupted into a chorus of suppressed gasps and whispers of disbelief. They couldn't believe there was electricity or searchlights, and they marveled at the sight of actual vegetable greenhouses. Instead of gun barrels, they were greeted by food containers. Everyone was ordered to disembark and follow the instructions for processing. They underwent decontamination to wash away years of radioactive dust, finally putting on clean uniforms and holding warm, fresh buns. When the scent of braised pork and stewed potatoes hit them, the psychological defenses of these wastelanders completely crumbled. One cried out that it was real meat, while a child told her mother the water actually tasted sweet. It was a lot to take in, really. Zhou Qing sat in a corner with his tray, watching his men eat like starving wolves while observing the clear, hopeful eyes of the base residents. He realized he had lost. Picking up a piece of braised pork, he swallowed his pride and his ambition along with the meat. He had lost completely, and he knew it. Meanwhile, in the base command center, the reports were coming in thick and fast. The handover was proceeding smoothly. An adjutant reported to Zhao Jiangwo that, after a preliminary screening of the group, the proportion of scientific researchers among these survivors was incredibly high, including 35 high-level executive experts. There were over 120 senior engineers and nearly 200 skilled technicians. And most importantly for our base, they had found the biology and mechanical engineering experts they lacked. They are treasures, Jiangwo noted with a satisfied nod. He ordered Dr. Su to be notified to integrate them into work positions immediately, especially those specialized in electronics. They were to assist Professor Chun in fully analyzing the data within that server. It was a massive undertaking, to be sure. However, the adjutant's expression suddenly turned grave. He mentioned that the sentries responsible for the outer perimeter had reported something odd. On the convoy's return route, they had felt a distinct vibration in the ground. Jiangwo asked if it was caused by the tanks. It didn't seem like it. The frequency was very low and originated from deep underground. It felt almost like something massive was turning over in its sleep. Deep down, Jiangwo felt a jolt of alarm as he pulled up the digital map. Directly beneath the city center lay the legendary mother nest. He wondered if their move had somehow disturbed it. Jiangwo sternly ordered the guards to increase their vigilance and for the radar to be switched to full power. The drone patrol range was doubled. If any abnormality was found, they were to sound the level 1 combat alarm immediately. And so, the order was given. At the same time, in a top-secret underground command center back in Beijing, a bloodshot-eyed Professor Chen stood with a black briefcase before a group of high-level officials who held the world's balance. He addressed the leaders, explaining that after 48 hours of cross-validation by 3 separate teams from the Academy of Sciences, he could now responsibly report to the organization that they had finally obtained the key to the future. The elderly man in the lead sat in silence as he listened. It meant their conventional submarines could now operate like nuclear ones, traveling indefinitely. If installed in tanks, their armored units would never need a fuel truck again. Imagine the possibilities. If we were to install it in drones, our swarms could circle the globe 3 times without ever touching the ground. And yet, this is merely the tip of the iceberg. We see the screen flicker as Dr. Su Wan's organized data begins to transmit. He explained that this tip of the iceberg would allow their submarines to travel indefinitely, just like nuclear-powered vessels. If installed in tanks, their armored units would never need a fuel truck again. And if they put it in drones, as he mentioned before, those drone swarms could fly around the entire world 3 times without landing. But that was only the beginning. We transitioned to the next set of files sent back by Dr. Su Wan. It was a carbon-based chip architecture. Although they didn't yet possess the lithography machines to produce it, the design logic was a full 2 generations ahead of current silicon-based chips. If they could master it, the technological stranglehold the West had held over their chips for 30 years would finally become history. Then there was the neural control for the exoskeletons. As the underlying logic for the holographic imaging appeared, the meeting room erupted in excitement. Has this been verified? The elderly leader tapped the table for silence. It has, Chen replied. They had used that single battery to power a high-energy laser in the lab. The result? It easily burned through 10 layers of tank armor plating, and the battery's power level had dropped by less than 1%. The elderly man then looked toward Zhao Jiangwo on the video screen. Jiangwo, what are Comrade Lin Han's thoughts on this? Reporting to the chief, Jiangwo replied in a heavy, serious tone. Comrade Lin Han's attitude is very clear. He is handing it all over to the state. He only made one request. He wanted these technologies to be converted into combat power as quickly as possible to counter the anomalies, because the threat might be far beyond their imagination. The elderly leader scanned the room. Comrades, if heaven offers a gift and we do not take it, we invite disaster. Since that boy has placed this immense fortune in our hands, we must not only accept it, but turn it into a sword to defend the nation's future. I propose the founding of the Kunlun Technology Group. It would serve as a cover for civil-military integration led by Comrade Chen Guofeng, utilizing the full strength of the nation. The goal was clear: concentrate all efforts on reverse engineering this otherworldly technology. Secondly, they wanted to show the world exactly what Huaxia speed looks like. Meanwhile, across the ocean at an intelligence headquarters, an officer felt something was wrong. What is it? His superior asked. It seemed the Eastern nation's energy grid and logistics systems had recently shown some fluctuations that were incredibly difficult to explain. They had mobilized a massive amount of technology and technical expertise within their borders. Working alongside domestic enterprises, they began a coordinated effort that spanned across every major industrial sector in the country. These domestic companies were being integrated into a singular, massive project, the likes of which the world had never seen before. As we look closer at these domestic enterprises, we see the Eastern nation's energy networks and logistics systems shifting once again. Recently, there had been more of those unexplainable fluctuations. They were moving a staggering amount of strategic materials and supplies, specialty alloys, rare earths, high-grade cement, and even some items that were far more concerning to the observers. They were pulling military equipment out of storage. Yet, these supplies weren't flowing toward any known national projects or bases. The materials weren't going to aircraft carrier docks or the northwestern launch sites. Their final destination remained frustratingly vague. Everything seemed to be converging on a certain coastal city in the south. But after that, the trail simply went cold, like a stone dropped in the ocean. The supplies vanished, and strangely enough, the civil power grid in that area showed no significant increase in load whatsoever. Instead, the encrypted traffic on military fiber optic cables had surged by 300%. It was, to say the least, quite strange. The supervisor narrowed his eyes. This silent, large-scale mobilization gave him a scent of something he knew all too well. It was the scent of extreme danger. He wondered if they were building secret underground fortifications or perhaps developing a new type of weapon that required such vast resources. Whatever they are doing, he muttered, keep a close eye on them. The supervisor set down his coffee cup, his voice turning cold. He ordered the activation of their deep-cover sleeper agents over there. The instructions were simple: find the truth at any cost. Half a month later, we find ourselves in the Haiban City high-tech zone. Inside a massive industrial park that had been abandoned for 6 months due to a lack of funding, everything had changed in just 2 weeks. The park had been completely resurrected. Late at night, countless heavy-duty military trucks roared inside, accompanied by armed guards. Armed police sealed off the intersections, and the park was even designated as a temporary no-fly zone. In front of the main office building, workers had just finished hanging a brand-new sign that read, Kunlun Technology Company, Limited. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony and no media presence for this company, which was destined to change the very structure of the world. It was established in an eerily low-key manner. On the top floor of the office building, the executive director of the Kunlun project, Lee Mo, stood watching the busy scene below, his coffee having already gone cold. Director Lee, a young secretary, called out, pushing the door open while clutching a thick stack of documents. The first batch of raw materials has already been moved into storage. The list included 300 tons of special titanium alloy, 50 tons of high-purity graphite tin, and materials urgently transferred from the National Reserve. The rare earth permanent magnet materials were all in place. And the production lines? Liamo asked, turning around. His eyes were sharp despite the lack of sleep. They are running at full capacity. Following Elder Chen's blueprints, we modified them overnight. 3 automated robotic arm production lines were ready. Line 1 was responsible for manufacturing the hydraulic joints of the Kunlun exoskeleton. Line 2 handled the precision casting of the load-bearing skeleton, while Line 3 focused on the core energy transmission module. It was estimated that the first batch of qualified components would be produced in 24 hours. Liamo nodded slowly. He pointed to the red secure phone on his desk. Just now, 3 more suppliers called to try and fish for information. They wanted to know exactly what was being built and why the purity requirements for the materials were so incredibly demanding. He told the secretary to inform the procurement department that if anyone dared to ask another question, they would be blacklisted forever. He also ordered the security department to raise the park's secrecy level once again. Yes, sir, the secretary replied as Lee Mo rubbed his temples. Half a month ago, he was still worrying about research funding. Now, a single signature could move hundreds of millions of dollars. The power to allocate entire trainloads of supplies was intoxicating, yet it also filled him with awe. That Project 01. He whispered to himself. He wondered where it had actually come from, for even as the executive, he lacked the clearance to know. The factories at Shuangchuanmen were ordered to produce top-tier components at any cost, which were then transported via a priority green channel. A moment later, the secretary returned and lowered her voice to report that a batch of specialized equipment had just arrived. It had been airlifted directly from the Institute of Biology at the Academy of Sciences, escorted by 2 fully armed special agents. They specified that the delivery was for the special warehouse. Liamo stood up abruptly, his mind racing at the mention of that location. This was the most mysterious destination for materials in the entire project. "Let them through," he said in a low, firm voice. He issued a strict order that, from now on, any vehicle heading to that warehouse must use the green channel without exception. No one was allowed to stop them, inspect them, or even keep a record of their passage. Meanwhile, at Forward Base 01, the once cold military base had gained a touch of scientific life now that the personnel and equipment from Lighthouse Camp had integrated. The second basement level had been transformed into a comprehensive laboratory. "Brilliant, simply brilliant," a voice echoed from the biology lab. Professor Zhang, a titan from the Academy of Sciences, marveled at the research notes. "Dr. Su," he said, looking at Su-Wan. "I cannot believe that under such scarce resource conditions, you actually thought to use extracts from common plants." He noted that using them to stabilize the active structure of the Z-virus was a stroke of genius. "We see a true breakthrough here." The professor admitted they had spent a lifetime in sterile Earth labs trying to kill viruses, never thinking to harness their energy. He believed this discovery could rewrite the history of human immunology. To be honest, it was a monumental claim. Su-Wan wiped the sweat from her brow, explaining it was born of necessity since they lacked low-temperature storage equipment back then. Without it, virus samples would die within 3 hours. She had tried every material on hand until she made a discovery. She found that the sap from the ghost-face candy plant, which grew in the ruins, could actually sustain the virus. This energy structure completely defied all existing laws of thermodynamics. It seemed that in this strange world, the laws of physics were a bit more flexible. Chen Feng leaned against the doorframe, watching this harmonious scene unfold. The chemical reaction between these eerie materials and Earth's deep industrial foundation was far more than just a simple addition. An Aijan appeared, smelling strongly of machine oil, to report that the first batch of Kunlun exoskeleton component kits had arrived from the other side. He asked if we wanted to see the engineers at work. Without a word, Lin Han walked quickly toward the first floor. The equipment workshop had been transformed into a small-scale arsenal, where a dozen mechanics were gathered around their latest projects. 3 silver-gray mecha suits stood there. Compared to the heavy carbon blanket prototypes from Lighthouse Camp, these were in a different league entirely. These 3 Kunlun Type I exoskeletons were practically works of art, featuring streamlined alloy armor and a sophisticated design. They utilized bionic hydraulic structures and Professor Chen's miniaturized solid-state hydrogen power cells. This, truly, was the Kunlun. An Aijan ran a hand over the cold metal, noting it weighed only 35 kilograms, but could carry a maximum load of 150. It could reach a 100-meter sprint speed in just 12 seconds and came integrated with the latest fire control assistance system. Even a raw recruit wearing this could easily suppress the heavy recoil of a machine gun. A terrifying advantage, to be sure. Lin Han nodded in satisfaction, calling it a dimensional strike and ordering them to be issued to the Special Ops team immediately. He had a feeling these peaceful days wouldn't last much longer. Just then, the walkie-talkie at his waist crackled to life. It was Su-Wan, her voice thick with excitement as she told Lin Han to come to the P3 lab. That thing was finally finished. Lin Han shared a look with an Aijan. It seemed today was turning out to be a very productive day indeed. He patted an Aijan's shoulder and suggested they go see what surprise Dr. Su had prepared for them. Inside the P3 biolab, Su-Wan carefully removed a metal tube from the cold storage unit, revealing a pale blue injectable liquid shimmering inside. On the monitors, Chun Guofeng and Zhao Jiangwo watched with solemn expressions. Su-Wan held the tube to the light, calling it the key. She explained it combined the induction principles of Formula 2 with the Ghostface Vine inhibitor they had just discovered. It was further refined with pure energy extracted from a first-order core. Chun Guofeng immediately asked about the safety protocols. Su-Wan maintained a rigorous professional tone, stating that while it was theoretically safe, the original Formula 2 was a different beast. That old version used brute force to crack human genetic sequences, overdrawing life force, but this improved version was far more refined. She explained that we should think of it as a gentle key, one that doesn't force the genetic locks open. Instead, it uses high-purity energy to guide the cells through a process of self-repair and subtle enhancement. Zhao Jiangwo, ever the pragmatist, was more interested in the results. Su-Wan admitted it wasn't as explosive as the Berserk serum. She estimated it could boost an ordinary person's strength and endurance by 30%, with a 20% increase in reaction speed. Most importantly, it would significantly bolster the immune system, providing a level of resistance against the virus itself. This meant that a soldier injected with this serum, even if scratched or bitten, would have a window of safety. As long as they were treated within an hour, they likely wouldn't turn. Chun Guofeng was thrilled, but Su-Wan wasn't finished. Her tone shifted as she reminded them this was still a first-generation prototype. They needed a volunteer for human clinical trials. Lin Han immediately stepped forward, offering his own arm. As the base leader, he felt it was his duty to go first. On the screen, Zhao Jingwo's voice boomed with authority, calling the idea complete nonsense and cutting Lin Han off. He reminded Lin Han that he wasn't just a leader, but the sole host of the Twin Gates. His life belonged to the nation now. He told him not to play the hero. Lin Han pulled his hand back and looked at An, who had also started to step forward. As the Special Ops Captain and the base's top combat commander, An was far too valuable to lose on a gamble. Lin Han refused to risk his life before they were certain of the safety protocols. So, the question remained, who would it be? Lin Han ordered them to go to the prisoner camp and bring back a man named Zhang Hu. He had a specific offer in mind. 5 minutes later, the former gang enforcer, Zhang Hu, stood in the lab, drenched in a nervous sweat. Lin Han didn't sugarcoat the situation. He told him plainly that this serum could make him stronger, or it could kill him. If he succeeded, he would become a core member of Base 01 and enjoy double the standard credit rewards. His past crimes would be wiped clean, but if he failed, they would simply bury him. Zhang Hu's throat tightened as he considered it. In the end, the massive temptation outweighed his fear. He steeled his resolve and told the commander he would do it. Zhang Hu climbed onto the experimental table, muttering that if he died, he'd just be a hero again in 18 years. He told them to begin. As the cold needle pierced his skin and the serum was injected, Zhang Hu let out a gut-wrenching scream, his muscles twitching violently. His veins bulged like frantic fire dragons beneath his skin, his heart rate hitting 160 as his blood pressure went off the charts. We see Su Wan watching with her hands clenched tightly, her breath held in anticipation. He continued to convulse until, finally, the shaking stopped. He lay there like a heap of mud, his entire body glowing with a feverish heat. His heart rate began to drop and his temperature stabilized. Su Wan let out a long, relieved sigh. The experiment was a success. When Zhang Hu opened his eyes, the world seemed unnaturally clear. The weakness from his hunger had been replaced by a surge of violent power. He felt a sudden rush of energy and, acting on instinct, he reached out and gripped the side of the table. There was a loud bang. The stainless steel armrest was crushed flat under his hand. He stared at it, stunned by his own strength, which had increased by 40%. Su Wan checked the data, noting that because his initial physical condition was so poor, the serum's impact was even more dramatic. Lin Han congratulated him, telling him his gamble had paid off. From that moment on, he was a member of the Spark Special Ops Unit. Zhang Hu knelt in gratitude, but his thanks were cut short by a violent tremor that shook the entire laboratory. Beakers fell from the tables and shattered into dust as the alarms began to blare. We hear Lei Long's voice roaring over the intercom. He shouted frantically that the underground defensive wall had been breached. He repeated the warning, the wall was gone. Something had burrowed inside, right beneath the armory. Lin Han's expression shifted instantly as he realized the gravity of the situation. The armory was the base's lifeline, and it seemed their uninvited guests couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed his walkie-talkie. With a cold, sharp gaze, he told his men it was time to earn their keep. An snapped his helmet shut, radiating a murderous intent. Zhang Hu grabbed a military shovel, a fierce light gleaming in his eyes. He vowed that no one would touch their armory while he was breathing. He swore he would tear apart anything that tried. We move now to the outer corridor of the underground armory. At the base of the reinforced wall, a massive hole 2 meters wide had been torn open. From deep within the darkness, a sound emerged. The sound of claws scraping against rock was enough to set anyone's teeth on edge. Orders barked out for all squads to establish a fan-shaped defensive line. Shield bearers took the front, while the fire support teams moved to the rear. An descended steadily, encased in his silver-gray Kunlun R-type armor. This mecha, a fusion of otherworldly energy and Earth's industrial might, radiated a truly heart-stopping sense of power. 12 Special Ops members quickly sealed off the corridor, their rifles locked onto the breach. Zhang Hu, too, was ready for what was coming. Still breathing heavily from the gene serum injection, Zhang Hu looked like a coiled spring ready to snap. He carried a massive hydraulic cutter weighing 50 pounds, yet in his hands, it looked as light as a simple wooden stick. An glanced at him, warning him not to be impulsive and to hold the blind spot on the right flank. Zhang Hu swallowed hard and nodded. His wild instincts were screaming at him that something was very wrong. Whatever was in that hole was far more dangerous than any zombie. Deep within the darkness, countless crimson eyes began to glow. Thermal imaging showed a massive surge of high-energy biological signatures, over 30 targets, with only 3 seconds until contact. 2 seconds, a dark shadow shot out like a bolt of lightning, lunging directly at An at the very front of the line. It was a slender, faceless monstrosity, its hands liquefied into massive, bony claws that looked sharp enough to slice through steel. An roared for his team to hold steady and wait for his signal. His mecha dropped into a low, heavy defensive stance. The claws slammed violently against An crossed arms. The impact cracked the floor beneath him, yet he didn't retreat a single step. He mocked the creature's strength, telling it to get lost as he engaged full power. His fist launched forward like a literal cannonball. With a sickening crunch, the monster's chest collapsed, and it was sent flying back toward the hole. This was the moment they'd waited for. Suppressive fire commenced. A metal storm from 12 rifles instantly poured into the mouth of the tunnel. Aided by their exoskeletons, the soldiers held their triggers down. The night hunters that tried to peek out were instantly turned into sieves. One soldier fired with one hand while reloading with the other, shouting for the creatures to die. It was a display of absolute precision. A few monsters managed to scramble onto the ceiling, attempting to bypass the frontal fire. They were moving fast, right above the team. Zhang shouted a sharp warning for the team to leave it to him, but Zhang, who had already moved, lunging forward like a frenzied centipede. He swung the massive hydraulic cutter with a violent force, and the monster's head exploded in midair like a rotten watermelon. Another creature managed to slash a deep gash across Zhang, whose body armor, and we see blood begin to flow immediately. But with his pain suppressed by the gene serum, Zhang, who simply reached back, crushed the monster's throat, and snapped its spine with a single punch. He laughed, clearly enjoying the rush, as the battle raged on for 15 minutes until no more dark shadows emerged from the hole. The gunfire finally began to fade, leaving behind a mountain of corpses and black blood that reached their ankles as the order to cease fire was given. Zhang raised a fist to signal for continued vigilance, his armor now covered in deep scratches as he ordered the team to reload under cover. He activated the scanning mode to examine the corpses, noting they lacked pain receptors and possessed a bone density 3 times that of a normal zombie. It seemed they had lived underground for a long time. Their vision had regressed, but their hearing and sense of smell were unnaturally sharp. Their claws featured specialized grooves for digging, and Su-won's voice crackled over the comms, identifying them as night hunters. She explained she had seen records of these creatures in the Black Tower database. They were the primary scouts for the Broodmother. Their specialty was digging tunnels and launching night raids, and their presence here meant the Broodmother had already locked onto our location. It was a sign that the main force of the nest wasn't far off, so Zhang looked into the bottomless hole and decisively ordered it sealed. He told the engineering team to use quick-dry cement to plug the hole and to bury vibration-sensitive mines within the walls. If they dared to dig through again, they would be blown to pieces. I intervened in the channel then, asking Zhang how he was holding up. Reporting to the chief, Zhang flexed his armored arm and noted that the equipment's performance was excellent, providing a total advantage. Aside from the cooling system running a bit hot under the high load, there were no issues. And then there was the matter of Zhang Hu. He described the man as a natural-born warrior, ruthless and tough, who was a true asset in the chaos of a brawl despite his lack of finesse. I gave the cold order from the command center to clear the battlefield and harvest the energy crystals, making sure not to waste a single one. I told them all that this was merely the appetizer, and the main course was still to come, even as the alarm finally went silent. Suddenly, the sharp, piercing wail of the air defense sirens cut through the air, signaling a new threat. We hear Zhao Zhangwo's grim voice over the comms, reporting a massive number of high-speed targets appearing on the radar. They were testing the blind spots of the fire defense network, repeatedly probing for a weakness as panic began to spread. The survivors from the recently integrated lighthouse base fell into a state of total collapse, terrified that the monsters had followed them. They cried out that the walls wouldn't hold, but the guards quickly shouted them down, demanding silence and order. The soldiers ordered everyone to stay put, reminding them that this was Base 01, not their old, broken camp. Searchlights swept frantically across the outer ruins, catching glimpses of agile, dark shadows darting through the wreckage. The creatures used the shadows to weave through the terrain, looking for a breach, while scouts reported no visual contact in Sector C. They were simply too fast to lock onto. But then, digging marks were discovered right beneath the walls of the district. Inside the command center, Zhao Zhangwo let out a cold laugh, realizing they were being distracted by a two-pronged subterranean and surface attack. They were testing the base's reaction speed. As Su-won noted with a pale face, this wasn't a pack of beasts, it was an army. She explained that these night hunters shared a unified hive mind, and unless they were wiped out all at once, they would keep coming. They would continue to throw themselves into the meat grinder until they exposed the base's hand, a strategy Zhao Zhangwo found almost amusing. With a cruel smile, he decided to show them exactly what he was holding, grabbing the radio to activate the regional defense system. He ordered 5 flares to be fired simultaneously to light up the sky, giving the land shield system a chance to warm up. In an instant, the night was turned into day, leaving the night hunters and the airborne carrion wyverns with nowhere to hide. The base's massive turrets shed their camouflage, revealing the Land Shield 3000, a state-of-the-art close-in weapon system. Equipped with an 11-barrel, 30mm rotary cannon, it boasted a terrifying fire rate of 11,000 rounds per minute. Once the fire control data was calculated, Leilong slammed the launch button, unleashing a blinding stream of high-density tracers. The armor-piercing shells poured out like a scythe of death, precisely sweeping the carrion wyverns right out of the sky. There was no time to react. Within 5 seconds, the creatures were blasted into a mess of shredded meat as the fire rained down. At a terrifying rate of 180 rounds per second, the night hunters and their cover were ground into dust in a 5-second burst. The probing monsters simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but a bloody sludge, while the survivors watched the display with their mouths agape. They were awestruck by this godlike power, wondering if it was truly over. One guard from the lighthouse camp looked on, his face pale with shock. He muttered that they used to lose several brothers just to kill one of those things, and they couldn't even scratch the wyvern's hides. Yet here, it took only 5 seconds. A veteran soldier proudly patted his weapon, noting that this is what true firepower looks like. He told them that once the radar sees you, you're already dead. Here, they solve problems with ammo, not lives, a luxury they'd have to get used to. Inside the command center, the targets were confirmed cleared. The radar showed no high-energy signatures. The enemy had retreated. Suwon stared at the screen, realizing the Mother Hive had cut ties with these scouts. It had already gathered the information it wanted. Since a ground assault was impossible and an aerial sneak attack failed, the enemy would be forced to change their tactics. Zhao Zhengwo gazed deeply into the night sky and told everyone not to relax. Now that the probing was over, the next move was coming. In all likelihood, a total offensive was imminent. He ordered Lizhan to have the special ops team rest and refit immediately. The real final battle was approaching. 2 weeks later, at the Kunlun Tech Industrial Park in Haiban City, the facility was ablaze with light. Inside the massive steel workshops, hundreds of CNC machines hummed together, creating an awe-inspiring industrial torrent. The place had become a heavily guarded fortress of steel, with sniper teams outside and a strictly closed management system within. The logistics supervisor waved his clipboard, shouting at the workers to have the shipment loaded before 3 in the morning. The crates were disguised as agricultural machinery, but the core personnel knew each one contained a potential military revolution. These were the Kunlun individual exoskeletons. Inside the workshop, 3 fully automated production lines were running at high speed. Titanium alloy plates danced under robotic arms, being integrated with solid-state hydrogen power cells. Micro-hydraulic servo motors were perfectly assembled. On the second-floor walkway, an assistant arrived with the latest yield report for President Lee. The young assistant excitedly handed over the tablet, showing that the yield rate for the Kunlun mass production models had reached 98%. Daily production could now reach 50 units, which, in the history of modern industry, was nothing short of a miracle. Liemo glanced at the report with a grim expression, noting that it still wasn't enough, as the orders from above were clear. He needed to see 200 finished units sent to the front within 3 days, a tall order that made the assistant gasp for air. That meant they would need to increase production capacity by another 30%, even though the machines were already running at their limits. Liemo turned sharply, telling them to add more water cooling and lubricant, and to keep those machines running without rest. This was a top priority emergency order directly from the military commission, and he warned that no one was allowed to fail. Every single exoskeleton had to be perfect, because they weren't just machines, they were a soldier's second life. Liemo looked back at the production line where a newly assembled black mech stood, a true masterpiece of industrial art. A logistics officer pushed a set of the armor toward a man named Zhang Hu, identifying it as unit number 01025. Thunder, 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 thunder. The officer explained that based on Zhang Hu's physique and his strength data after the gene serum injection, this suit was custom-made. It was a heavy-duty model. Yes, it sacrificed a bit of flexibility, but the trade-off was well worth the cost. The frontal armor and load-bearing capacity had been significantly reinforced, as the officer pointed out the thickened hydraulic cylinders. Its power output was 1.5 times that of the standard model, allowing him to easily wield heavy cold weapons in battle. Or perhaps he could operate a heavy machine gun alone, as Zhang Hu's trembling hand brushed the cold metal surface before being told to try it on. Li Zhan walked over, having changed into a commander-type exoskeleton himself, and gave the order to initiate the system startup. As a faint current flowed through his body, Zhang Hu felt weightless, with power surging through his veins as Li Zhan asked how it felt. Zhang Hu clenched his fists, the hydraulic boost cracking the air with a loud bang, and joked that he wanted to fight 10 enemies at once. Li Zhan patted his shoulder armor, noting there were 150 sets in this batch, and they were being prioritized for this specific group. These were the recruits who had received the gene serum, and from this moment on, they were the heavy infantry company of Base 01. He turned to the 100 steel-clad warriors, reminding them that this equipment was a gift from the organization, and wearing it changed everything. They were no longer wandering refugees of the wasteland, but the defenders of civilization, standing before 2,000 defenseless compatriots. If they retreated a single step, those people would face certain death, a reality that the men acknowledged with a thunderous shout of understanding. Before the echoes died down, the piercing shriek of a maximum-level air raid siren tore through the air as the radar station reported in. With a voice full of terror, the operator announced that the long-range search radar had detected a massive cluster of aerial targets at bearing 030. At an altitude of 2,000 meters, the count exceeded 10,000, a number so staggering the operator had to repeat it for emphasis. Li Jian looked up at the monitors where tens of thousands of axe-flesh wyverns moved like a black tsunami, completely blotting out the sky. One might have mistaken it for a storm cloud, but Li Jian simply lowered his mask with a flash of red light, calling it the main course. He ordered immediate level 1 combat readiness, leading the heavy infantry company to the surface to knock those winged monsters out of the sky. In the underground command center, dozens of screens flickered to life as the long-range warning radar picked up the massive, abnormal signals. The swarm was 250 kilometers away, maintaining an altitude of 3,000 meters and moving at a terrifying speed. Li Jian quickly pulled up the tactical map while the operator's voice wavered, confirming the preliminary estimate of over 10,000 targets. The swarm was confirmed to be axe-flesh wyverns, and seeing 10,000 of them caused Li Jian to knit his brows in grim concentration. He activated the Level 1 air defense response, ordering the Red Flag Brigade to engage, though he knew this wasn't just a battle, it was an onslaught. It was time for some industrial-scale pest control as the camouflage nets outside the base fell away, revealing the Red Flag's 16 FV missile systems. The anti-aircraft vehicles raised their launch tubes toward the sky, their phased array radars locking onto the targets in a heartbeat. As the swarm entered the 70-kilometer range, the order was given for a full salvo launch, and the first wave of stings was released. 32 missiles pierced the night sky, their high-explosive fragments detonating 70 kilometers away right in the heart of the black cloud. They blossomed into spheres of death, sending tens of thousands of preset fragments into a chain reaction that rained flesh and blood from the sky. With the first wave confirmed to have taken out 1,500 units, the second wave of missiles was loaded and immediately launched. By the third and fifth waves, the missiles acted like giant brooms sweeping away the black clouds, though a few surviving wyverns managed to break through. They closed within 10 kilometers of the base, only to be met with an even more desperate fate as the close-in defense systems were unlocked. The order for free fire was given, and the 11-barreled 30mm Gatling guns roared, lashing out with 3-kilometer-long whips of crimson fire. Tearing through the night at a rate of 11,000 rounds per minute, they wove a zone of absolute and certain death. The wyverns that slipped through didn't even have time to scream before they were turned into bursts of bloody mist, leaving the defense zone cleared. In less than 10 minutes, the entire swarm of 10,000 axe-flesh wyverns had been completely annihilated, with no survivors confirmed. On the ground, Zhang, who watched the fireworks display in the sky and looked around in confusion, wondering if it was really over while gripping his chain's word. He had hoped to get a bit of a workout, but as Li Jian calmly explained, this is the reality of modern warfare. There was no hand-to-hand combat and no hot-blooded glory, only data and cleanup, as these low-level mutants weren't even worthy of a challenge. They didn't even get to see a human face before dying, but as Li Jian looked toward the ruins, he knew the real threat was still coming. Suddenly, the radar operator's voice began to tremble again, reporting a high-energy target reaction moving at an incredible speed. The target was flying low, hugging the ground to stay beneath the radar's primary gaze. It only pulled up once it was within 2 kilometers of the base, a deliberate, calculated ambush that Li Jian immediately ordered the systems to lock onto. The whips of fire lashed out once more, yet the 30mm armor-piercing shells merely rippled harmlessly against the target's mysterious aura. The shells were being deflected by a thick, dark purple halo, an energy shield that left Su-1 gasping in shock. According to the research data from the Lighthouse camp, this was a special ability possessed only by Tier 3 mutants. They could convert the energy from the Golden River into a biological field for physical protection, and its strength was incredibly high. It was equivalent to over 500 millimeters of composite armor, and under the searchlights, a massive 15-meter Wyvern King appeared. As it revealed its true form, it shrugged off the ground fire, its eyes burning with the cold fury of tactical intelligence. Like a purple meteor, it slammed toward the base, consuming its shield energy, but moving at a speed that was far too fast. It would reach the base long before the shield was exhausted, and Lei Long shouted over the channel that the tanks couldn't lock on. He was flying too high for the main guns to reach, and as we watched the glowing spot approach, a cold light flashes in Li Jian's eyes. Li Jian spoke calmly over the public channel, telling Lei Long not to worry, even if the missiles and cannons had failed. He mapped out a designated landing zone, preparing to activate Interception Plan B, the electromagnetic gravity trap. All ground personnel were ordered to bunkers immediately, as the heavy infantry prepared for impact. Li Jian was ready to get his hands dirty. He decided to let the beast in, locking onto that purple streak, figuring if it wanted a decapitation strike, they would play along. Since the creature wanted a melee, they would give it one, and the heavy infantry company confirmed they were in position. They would wait for him in the base square, and Li Jian calmly asked Su-1 to analyze the creature's weaknesses. She explained that the shield's energy came from the Golden River inside its body, meaning a direct hit to that source was vital. If they could force its energy consumption to exceed its replenishment rate, the shield would collapse instantly, which meant one thing. We see that they needed either much stronger firepower or a far more precise strike to end this threat. In theory, Suwon noted that the armor-piercing rounds from a 125mm tank gun should be enough. But that required the target to be on the ground, or at least low enough for the tanks to aim, so Li Jian decided to bring it down. He drew a red circle on the main screen with burning resolve. If the monster wanted to fight, they would give it a warm welcome. The hardened ground of the base's central square shattered in an instant as the massive, purple Wyvern King descended. A violent gale scattered supply crates everywhere while the beast raised its head, letting out a roar that shook the very soul. Its purple eyes were filled with contempt and tyranny, yet the panicked flight it expected from the humans never happened. The square remained deathly silent, save for the cold beams of the searchlights that remained locked firmly onto its body. Dozens of soldiers, clad in Kunlun Type I exoskeletons, began to walk slowly out of the shadows and into the light. They held heavy, unbladed chains words as Li Jian, leading the group, tested the movement of his hydraulic joints. "Welcome to hell," he seemed to say, and the Wyvern King appeared to understand the provocation, roaring in fury. Its spiked tail swung like a heavy mace with a sonic boom, and Li Jian shouted for everyone to scatter immediately. His hydraulic pumps engaged with a sudden burst, ejecting him several meters to the right just in time. The massive tail carved a half-meter-deep trench into the reinforced concrete. He ordered them to strike and keep it grounded. For special alloy steel cables shot out like venomous snakes, wedging themselves firmly into the gaps of the Wyvern King's wing bones. Two more cables entangled its hind legs as the beast struggled wildly, prompting the order to hold it down at all costs. Zhang Hu roared as he pushed his exoskeleton to maximum power, his steel boots grinding sparks against the pavement. 3 other soldiers gripped their cables with everything they had, their combined output exceeding 5 tons of force. But against a Tier 3 Beast King, it still wasn't enough. The Wyvern King flapped its wings and yanked all 4 off the ground. Zhang Hu cursed through gritted teeth while suspended in midair, realizing the beast had dozens of tons of leg strength. Li Jian decided to add a little something extra to the mix, activating his chains word and leaping up with jet assistance. He shot like a cannonball toward the beast's soft underbelly, but the Wyvern King opened its massive maw in response. A purple light glowed deep within its throat, and Suwon screamed over the comms for him to watch out for the acid. There was no time to dodge, so Li Jian braced his arms to take the hit as the thick, purple acid completely submerged him. Sizzle, thick white smoke billowed from the armor as alarms shrieked a frantic warning. The integrity dropped to 60% as external sensors failed, making Zhang Hu's eyes widen in sheer terror. He released one hand to bite the pin off a high-explosive grenade, hurling it at the Wyvern King's head. The grenade detonated right before the beast's eyes, blinding it and cutting off the stream of acid. Li Jian slammed heavily into the ground, yet he stubbornly stood back up in his pitted, corroded exoskeleton. The beast was utterly enraged now, but as we see, that was exactly the opportunity they needed. Folding its wings, the Wyvern King charged like a heavy tank, intent on crushing these insects into the dirt. The earth trembled, yet not a single soldier retreated, for the true king of the battlefield was about to arrive. From the shadows of a side hangar came the heavy thud of a chamber loading and the grind of metal treads. The beast's Tier 3 instincts made it freeze as a cold, massive steel monster emerged from the darkness. It was a ZTZ-99A main battle tank, sporting a 125mm high-pressure smoothbore cannon. At a distance of less than 50 meters, the barrel pointed directly at the Wyvern King's head. A cold voice over the comms ordered an armor-piercing shell to be loaded as the beast felt true mortal fear. It frantically doubled its purple energy shield just as the command to fire sent a muzzle storm across the square. The fin-stabilized sabot round exited the barrel at 1700 meters per second, a force of absolute kinetic energy. The purple shield, which could supposedly withstand 30mm autocannons, shattered like thin tissue paper. The shell tore through the Wyvern King's chest, blowing a transparent hole straight through its core. Purple blood and organs sprayed everywhere as the residual energy carved a deep crater in the ground behind it. The purple light faded as the massive corpse collapsed, leaving the soldiers to marvel at the justice of high-caliber weaponry. Zhang Hu swallowed hard while still dangling in the air, and in the command center, Suwon finally exhaled. "This is the sample we've been waiting for, so we see the recovery team ordered to dig out that core, our ticket to Tier 3. As a reward, the heavy armored company gets extra rations tonight, a small gesture as the smoke finally begins to clear. Suwon, clad in a white biohazard suit, uses a high-frequency laser cutter to carefully probe through the charred, blackened flesh. She slowly extracts a deep, dark purple crystal that looks as though a fragment of a star shower has been sealed inside. The energy pulses cause the air to warp slightly. The radiation is high, but the energy itself is remarkably pure. Its density is at least 10 times that of a Tier 2 core, and if she can decode its structure, everything changes. Our research into solid-state hydrogen batteries would take a massive leap forward, a fact he acknowledges while taking the container. However, its primary mission isn't to be a battery, and so they head off to see exactly what this key can do. Returning to the underground portal hall, he brings out that deep purple Tier 3 core, the air thick with anticipation. The portal senses the energy, its blue vortex spinning violently and sending a low hum vibrating through the entire base. A high-level energy core is detected, and with the base's reserves full, the requirements for a Tier 3 upgrade are finally met. He gives the command to upgrade, and the core dissolves into purple light, sinking into the vortex as invisible waves ripple outward. The portal expands rapidly to 10 meters square, wide enough for main battle tanks to pass through side by side. Fluorescent runes emerge on the frame as the system reaches level 3, now standing as a massive 10 by 10 meter gateway. The cooldown is gone, and the cost to keep it open is halved, but it's the new features that are truly interesting. A personal subspace is unlocked, a 1,000 cubic meter warehouse where time stands perfectly still and safety is absolute. There is also a secondary gate, which can be opened at any designated location to link directly back to the main portal. This allows for instant transport, while an environmental field begins purifying viruses and radiation within a 5-kilometer radius. It even suppresses low-level zombies, but for him, the arrival of the personal storage space is the real prize. He tests it by storing a container in under a second. He now carries a mobile armory capable of holding dozens of tanks. This effectively ends his logistical nightmares, but it pales in comparison to the strategic value of the subspace gate. He realizes he can now open a portal directly onto a resource point. Linhan, look at this. Suwon stares at the monitor and gasps, noticing the radiation levels around the light gate are dropping rapidly. The virus concentration in the air is also falling. The gate is evolving the environment through an evolutionary field. From this day forward, the 5-kilometer radius around Base 01 will be the only pure land in this wasteland. We can finally consider taking off our biohazard suits, he says with a smile. This is truly remarkable. It is hundreds of times more efficient than Earth's best air purification towers. If only the range could expand further. With a determined look at the soldiers behind him, he gives the order to immediately expand the underground garage. We need to prepare for even bigger arrivals, because now that the gate is larger, heavy machinery can pass through. He plans to bring in even greater weapons and orders the staff to completely rewrite their operational plans. Our next objective is no longer just a simple clearing of the perimeter, he says, pointing to the map's northwest. This is Redstone Canyon, which according to Lighthouse Camp records, is rich in rare earth minerals. It also contains a high-energy mineral called redstone. Professor Chen Guofeng has sent word from Earth. Their reverse engineering of solid-state hydrogen batteries has hit a bottleneck. We can build the batteries, but there's a catch. They cannot solve the stability issues under high-energy states, which makes it impossible to miniaturize the technology. However, this redstone is a perfect natural stabilizer. Only by securing it can they move forward. Then we can mass-produce military-grade high-energy batteries and give the Kunlun exoskeletons a true heart. His gaze shifts toward the city center, specifically the Tianxiong Mansion, which was once the tallest building in Haishan. It houses the most complete pre-war technological data and a supercomputing center, leaving Su Wan deep in thought. These two locations are of immense strategic value, but the cost of a forced advance with current forces is high. That may have been true before, he says with a confident smile, but with the subspace gate, distance is no longer an issue. We are going to plant our flag in Redstone Canyon and turn that mining area into our own private backyard. We move now to the Xingfu Jiyuan community in Haiban City, specifically to Base 01, located 3 levels underground. This was the very first forward base established after the state took control of the Light Gate, and after 3 months of urgent expansion. It has become a massive underground fortress, connected directly to the military armory by a heavy-duty railway. As the giant light gate in the new district ripples with energy, Suwon steps through, dressed in her deep blue uniform. A lingering exhaustion is visible in her eyes as he leans against a metal desk, tossing his car keys with a smile to welcome her back to Earth. Suwon greedily breathes in the air. We must remember that back at Base 01 in the wasteland, no matter how thick the shielding was, the air outside was always filled with radioactive dust and the stench of decay. But here, even the smell of dust in a basement feels sweet to her. All indicators are normal and no viruses are detected. As the green light of the scanner flickers on, the tedious decontamination process is skipped thanks to the level 3 gate's purification field. He suggests she head to the locker room to change, noting that since this is a vacation, she shouldn't dress so formally. A few minutes later, Suwon emerges wearing a white sweater and light blue jeans, her first time out of combat gear in 12 years. As the elevator ascends from level 3 to 1, he notices her nervously clutching the hem of her shirt until the doors finally open. There are no alarms or monstrous roars. Instead, her ears are filled with the vibrant, mundane noise of a neighborhood. Children shout and families discuss dinner plans as they push open the building's main door, stepping into the brilliant midday sun. The light makes Suwon squint as we see children chasing each other in the small square while the elderly play chess nearby. A golden retriever sunbathes lazily, and in the distance, the city is alive with towering buildings and the flow of heavy traffic. This ordinary winter afternoon looks like paradise through Su-won's eyes, and without warning, tears begin to stream down her face. In the wasteland, plants are killers and life is a scream. But here, she realizes with a heavy heart, life is finally free. The sun, she reaches out, and the warmth filtering through her fingers begins to melt the ice that has gripped her heart for 12 long years. Lin Han stands quietly beside her, reminding her that here, she doesn't have to worry about radiation or the sting of acid rain. There are no mutants waiting to lunge from the shadows. Here, she can simply sleep under the sun until she wakes up naturally. Her voice trembles with a sob as she admits she had almost forgotten the world could look like this, and Lin Han gently hands her a tissue. He stays with her in silence, knowing this peace is the anchor their souls need, as Su-won finally wipes away her tears. As they sit together on a park bench, we hear a nearby couple shouting in excitement over something they've just seen on their phones. It seems new battery technology has just been released, promising phones that last a week and electric cars with incredible range. Is this the true meaning of peace? She murmurs to herself, watching the mundane technological marvels of a world not under siege. Lin Han confirms it. They are bringing the nightmares of the wasteland back to transform them into miracles using the other world's resources. All of this is to protect the simple, everyday life of this world, and Su-won finally gives him her first real smile in over a decade. She asks Lin Han to take her for a walk, specifically requesting a milk tea, full sugar and plenty of ice, a luxury she's missed. With a polite gesture, he leads the way and soon hands her the chilled cup, exactly as she requested it. We follow them as Lin Han takes her to find a place to eat, guiding her through the vibrant, bustling streets of the city. She takes a satisfied sip, the sudden burst of sweetness in her mouth feeling like a revelation after so many years of hardship. Back in the wasteland, sugar was a strictly controlled resource, and the luxury of ice was something they could only dream of. Her gaze turns distant as she mentions that at the lighthouse base, they didn't even have a simple ice machine, even in the sweltering heat. They were forced to drink warm water, a small detail that highlights the contrast as they walk toward the outdoor seating of the commercial district. Her eyes soften with a touch of melancholy as she watches the elderly pushing strollers. Babies, she notes, are a rare sight where she comes from. At the lighthouse base, a pregnant woman is treated with the utmost care, with everyone giving up their best resources to support her. Because every new life is a flicker of hope, yet even with that devotion, only 3 children were born in the base over 12 years. 2 of them didn't even make it a month before passing away. He remains silent, knowing such pain is beyond words. "Let's go," he says softly. He decides to take her to the mall, and half an hour later, they arrive at the city's largest shopping center, where Su-won freezes like a statue. We see mountains of bright fruit on the shelves, neat rows of fresh meat in the freezers, and even live fish swimming in tanks. She can hardly believe it's real, so he picks up an apple to show her, its fresh fragrance a sharp contrast to the world she left behind. Back there, even contaminated fruit was a luxury reserved for the elite, yet here, it is piled casually by the side of the aisle. When she sees a clerk toss a few slightly bruised strawberries into the trash, Su-won's fists clench tight with a sudden, sharp intensity. Her breathing becomes heavy as she mutters that it's too much. They have no idea how precious these things are, or what they would cost back home. For just a few of those strawberries, 10 people might have died. Unable to watch any longer, she turns toward the daily necessities section. Dozens of brands of shampoo and fragrant body washes remind her of the crude animal fat soaps they were forced to use at the lighthouse base. She points at the dazzling array of snacks and asks if they are truly edible, a question that seems absurd in any other context. In her world, every scrap of food had to undergo at least 3 rounds of virus and radiation testing before it could ever touch a person's lips. We follow them to the 5th-floor food court, where the rich aroma of roasted meat and hot pot fills the air as young people scroll through their phones. A flicker of pain crosses Su-won's eyes as she overhears them complaining that the meat is too fatty. It is, to her, an unthinkable extravagance. In the wasteland, simply having a full stomach is the ultimate happiness, so Lin Han looks into her eyes and speaks with sudden gravity. This is exactly why they must bring the nightmares of that world back, to transform them into miracles using the resources of the other side. He tells Dr. Su that their work exists to protect the simple peace of this world, and she falls into a long, thoughtful silence. The urge to protect all of this begins to surge wildly within her heart, and she suddenly looks up at Lin Han with eyes as firm as iron. She declares she is done playing and wants to go to Redstone Canyon immediately, catching him off guard since they had agreed to relax for the day. She has had enough relaxation. Turning away from the city lights shimmering outside the window, she stares at him with a burning intensity. More than shopping, she now wants to see those redstones being moved into the lab, because only those things can truly secure this world's future. To fundamentally solve the stability issues of high-energy batteries, he must establish a resource point in the Redstone Canyon of the other world, and the first step is to establish a spatial anchor point at Special Warehouse Number 3 on the Earth side. This very spot will serve as the secondary gate's location. He pats the cold wall, recording the coordinates. With the preparations on this side complete, the next task is clear. He must travel to the other world to open the other side of this door. Lizhan habitually checks the gear as the helicopter formation is already standing by. According to the plan, they will take off from Base 01 and conduct an aerial penetration of 128 kilometers. And so, the journey begins. He steps through the gate of light onto the other world's helipad, where 3 Z-20s and 2 Z-10s are already tearing through the silence of the wasteland. He leads his elite squad as they board the aircraft with practiced efficiency. Su-won stands on the ground, her expression filled with worry. He tells Dr. Su to wait for his news. Once the secondary gate opens, she can pass through directly, ensuring a safe and fast journey. Their target is Redstone Canyon, at an altitude of 1,500 meters. Maintaining radio silence, the 5 aircraft strike out toward the north. It is a focused, professional operation. Below them, the shadows of clouds reveal the faint silhouettes of flying dragons. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is grim and heavy. They have even applied the beast repellent spray developed by Dr. Su. As long as they don't provoke the creatures, they should remain undetected. 40 minutes later, the Crimson Earth appears below like congealed blood. They have finally reached the target area. Signs of large biological activity are detected below, and a preliminary fire sweep is suggested. He grants his approval immediately. Watching the shadows lurking below, he gives the command. The Z-10's rockets instantly saturate the ground amidst the wails of gathering rock-armored beasts. As they descend to the landing zone, he walks quickly toward a perfect cliff face. He instructs the system to set the anchor point. A golden gate of light swings wide across the wasteland of the other world, revealing the bright, familiar warehouse back on Earth. The passage is successfully established. Wiping sweat from his brow, he tells Lizhan to bring everyone through, and the main battle tanks follow. The heavy tracks crush the red stone beneath them. In less than 5 minutes, the tank formation is deployed, their dark muzzles locked onto the canyon depths. Through the thick smoke, several massive rock-armored beasts emerge, roaring as they charge out to defend their territory. It seems the locals aren't exactly welcoming. He retreats behind the armor with a cold smile, ordering all units to open fire at will. With this level of energy density, these resources could be high-energy explosives even without being batteries. With these in hand, we could even attempt to replicate their energy shield technology. To be honest, they must act quickly to establish a presence here. A sealed laboratory is essential, as the black jade and radiation won't wait for them. It is time to let loose and get to work. He points to the engineering vehicles streaming out behind him. This will be their new launch point. Upon returning to the base, a holographic map outlining the Haishan City Death Zone is laid out in the command center. According to the Lighthouse Camp data, the Tianxiong building is the very epicenter of the disaster that struck Haishan City. Su-won points to that isolated island surrounded by the lost. The third basement level houses the supercomputing center, while above ground. The 50th and 60th floors are biological laboratories, with the top floors serving as the Energy Research Institute. Most importantly, the building has an independent energy system, a functional nuclear fusion power station. In theory, it could still be running, but the question remains, how do they get in? Li Zhan's expression turns heavy at the mention of fusion. He asks Dr. Su if she is certain, as controllable nuclear fusion is no small matter. Su-won nods in firm confirmation. If they can secure the technical data for that equipment for the Earth side, then he is determined to take it. He whispers. Facing a defensive line of millions of zombies, a conventional push would be suicide. They cannot take it by force. Lizhan, the heavy armored battalion commander, points to the industrial zone outside the base. They need a more direct method. And then, Lizhan wears a cold, soldierly smile as he suggests requesting a bomber deployment. They could take off from the airfield and drop incendiary bombs to turn the entire city center into ash. He agrees to burn it all. Using napalm and white phosphorus, they will turn the death zone into a sea of fire. But what about the Tianxiong building? Su-won's brow furrows. The building is reinforced concrete and has its own energy system, which is a stroke of luck. Theoretically, it can withstand the high temperatures. Besides, we don't actually need to burn the entire city to the ground. They only need to clear enough safe passages for ground troops to enter the building. But then the question arises, what about the flying mutants? That is why we must establish anti-aircraft positions. Li Zhan's finger moves across the map. This operation is no small-scale raid. After all, it is a full-scale military operation. We are about to establish the first true military base in this other world. Su-won asks how long such a feat will take, and he turns to Wang Gong to provide the answer. Wang Gong estimates it will take 3 days to clear and level the runway, though he notes that is the most ideal scenario. If they encounter large-scale zombie interference, it could take much longer. In that case, they will simply have to strengthen their defenses. Director Zhao looks to Lizhan, the heavy battalion commander, ordering his unit to handle the perimeter and ensure the construction's safety. Su-won asks about the total cycle for the operation. Wang Gong calculates quickly and answers, 5 days. Just 5 days. Lizhan takes a deep breath and approves the plan. For nuclear fusion technology, this risk is worth taking. The code name, Operation Flame. Director Zhao gives the final approval. 3 days later, we see the once barren industrial zone has been transformed into a steel runway. Through the Level 3 light gate, aircraft parts are delivered and rapidly assembled. Inside the hangar, the scene is one of intense focus. 6K bombers, loaded with what they call the Hell Package, reveal their lethal edge. The commander receives the report. The airfield is ready. The fleet is assembled and ready for takeoff at a moment's notice. Lizhan stands in the control tower, looking quite satisfied with the progress. Everything is prepared. He asks for final authorization to begin the bombing mission, and Director Zhao gives the word to proceed. The pilots are ordered to board. Soon, the thunderous roar of massive engines echoes across the wasteland as the Thunder Formation prepares. Takeoff is approved. 6 bombers and 8 J-16 fighters scream into the sky, heading straight for the heart of Haishan City. The target is confirmed, the center of Haishan City, the Red Death Zone. Suddenly, they are intercepted by flying dragons in midair. Flying targets are spotted ahead, about 30 of them, identified as carrion wyverns, and they are closing in fast on our fleet. The escort formation prepares to intercept. Lizhan coldly orders them not to let the creatures get anywhere near the bombers. Targets are locked, and they are ready to open fire. The PL-15 missiles are primed and waiting for the moment of impact. They weave a web of fire and death, and 2 minutes later, the threat vanishes into thin air. The danger has been cleared. The escort continues. They have entered the target airspace and receive the order to begin the drop. Bombs away. Hundreds of napalm bombs fall like a torrential rain onto the city. Amidst the roar, the Red Death Zone is transformed. It becomes a sea of molten lava as black smoke swallows the sky. The first round is complete, and temperatures hit 800 degrees. Lizhan coldly orders them to continue until every zombie is ash. The bombing runs continue to scour the earth for an entire day. By dusk, the hellhole that once housed millions of zombies is nothing but scorched earth. The commander receives the final report. The target area is cleared, with a projected zombie survival rate of less than 1%. A job well done, indeed. Director Zhao stares at the screen and tells Lizhan it is time for the ground troops to move in. The following day begins. The armored convoy crosses the warm ruins to reach the Tianxiong building, where 4 teams quickly fan out to secure the area. Lizhan leads his men up the service elevator to the 80th floor, the very heart of the Energy Research Institute. They found it. He pushes open the laboratory doors to find the shield generator and carbon-based chips sitting quietly inside a reinforced safe. They move quickly to scan the data and open the containers, using a plasma cutter to slice through the final barrier. Every bit of data from the supercomputing center is copied, and the biological samples have been successfully collected. The equipment blueprints have been scanned, and the core data for the nuclear fusion power station has finally been downloaded. Holding the heavy chips and blueprints, he feels the weight of human progress returning. The mission, it seems, is a success. They prepare to evacuate, but then the early warning radar detects a massive reaction nearly 150 kilometers away. A swarm of flying targets is approaching at high speed. Just as the convoy exits the ruins, the situation takes a turn. The communication channel explodes with a frantic warning from air traffic control. Lizhan calmly demands the target's characteristics. The radar screen is completely red. These aren't wyverns. The signals are much denser and more fragmented than before. It is a swarm of mutated locusts, at least 100,000 of them. Inside the transport, the air suddenly turns to ice. The accompanying expert turns pale, explaining that these are highly toxic scavengers. Once they catch the scent of blood, they will hunt like rabid dogs until the very end. Lizhan asks how much ammunition the J-16 formation has left. The answer is grim. They are empty. The convoy is 12 kilometers away, requiring 15 minutes at full speed. Contact is expected in 8 minutes, leaving a 7-minute gap that serves as a death sentence. But missiles aren't everything. With a sharp glint in his eyes, Lizhan orders the J-16s to execute the sheepdog tactic. After all, these are beasts, not an organized army. He coldly remarks that if they are beasts, they can be taught to fear for their lives. From 10,000 meters up, 8 fighters suddenly dive. The pilots are ordered to engage their afterburners. They perform a supersonic flyby, and the terrifying sonic booms hit like thunder, shattering the internal organs of the lead locusts. The charging formation of 100,000 beasts collapses instantly. A job well done, the anti-air battalion commander cheers. However, this is only a delay. After a brief moment of chaos, the swarm's bloodlust takes over, and they lock onto the convoy again. Lizhan grips the railing and orders the convoy to move at full speed, ignoring formation. They are still 100 kilometers out. As they enter the optimal range for the HQ-16FE, the first volley of 24 missiles is launched into the sky. They detonate in the heart of the black cloud, sending thousands of locusts falling, yet tens of thousands more survive. The pursuit continues relentlessly. At 15 kilometers, they enter the effective range of the LD-3000. It is time to open fire. Providing fire cover for the convoy, for long streams of fire weave a web of absolute death across the horizon. A firing rate of 11,000 rounds per minute begins to shred the black tide attempting to swallow the vehicles. A few stray locusts manage to slam into the roof of the command vehicle, sounding like a heavy, rhythmic hail. The dual 35mm cannons on the flanks immediately unleash high-speed rounds, constructing one final, impenetrable barrier. At the cost of nearly 30,000 carcasses, the swarm finally breaks. To be honest, it was a narrow escape. The convoy bursts through the airport gates. Lizhan steps out of the car, his boots sinking into a thick carpet of black and red flesh. The radio crackles as pilots call the tower, reporting low fuel and requesting permission to land. We watch as the 8 fighters descend. Lizhan turns to the stunned Su-won, telling her that this is the steel storm she wanted. Against absolute firepower, numbers mean nothing. Su-won nods, finally understanding. Previously, they only thought about how to hide, but now she knows exactly how to win. It is time to return to Earth. With this data, the next shipment will include much more than just anti-aircraft guns. 2 days later, back in the real world, we see the blueprints for the nuclear fusion prototype. It is a sight to behold. Old academician Wang is so moved that his hands tremble, his glasses reflecting the cool blue light of the digital screen. It isn't just blueprints. Lizhan points out the complete experimental data and the formulas for the core materials. A goldmine, really. With these resources, they can fully construct the first operational miniature nuclear fusion reactor within a mere 3 months. 3 months. Elder Wang takes off his glasses, his voice thick with emotion as he processes the timeline. He wipes away tears, noting that according to their original progress, this would have taken at least another 30 years to achieve. He tells Comrade Lizhan that he has brought back a future for the nation. This means they will finally be free. They will break the shackles of energy dependence, leading to an explosive growth in industrial capacity and a shift in global power. They will hold the ultimate bargaining chip. Lizhan humbly insists this is just the start. Next, they have carbon-based chips to master. Elder Wang explains that the Gravel project has already been established as a special task force to handle these breakthroughs. He will personally lead it, mobilizing the nation's top experts. To be honest, no better man could be chosen for the job. They will tackle these technologies with everything they have. Whether it's manpower, funding, or equipment, he only needs to ask. The state offers its full support. However, Lizhan admits that the most urgent shortage they face right now is redstone. The upgrade of solid-state hydrogen batteries and the development of high-energy weapons both depend entirely on this high-energy stabilizer. Although they have cleared the path to Redstone Canyon, the current mining volume simply cannot keep up with their ambitious plans. Elder Wang remains confident, promising that even if they have to hollow out that entire mountain, the supply of raw materials is guaranteed. Lizhan nods and looks out the window, where the industrial park has already been transformed into a massive construction site, the nation's war machine. It is now running at full speed, all to support the grand project unfolding in that other world.